Hi guys, tonight we step quietly into the lacquering stone corridors of a medieval castle in the dead of winter. The air is sharp and thin, it feels like a cold hand pressing against your face. The torches flicker on the walls, throwing long shadows that dance like ghosts. You can smell the damp stone and the faint scent of wood smoke. The wind is howling outside the big stone walls, but inside it is very still and very quiet. You are wearing a heavy wool cloak that feels thick on your shoulders. It is the only thing keeping you from the biting chill. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and if you want to let me know where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing those little snapshots of the world. Now dim the lights and let the story begin. You are standing at the big wooden gate of the castle. It is very dark out. The moon is a thin slice of silver in the black sky. It gives just enough light to see the snow falling. The flakes are large and soft. They do not make a sound as they land on your hood. Behind you, the drawbridge is being pulled up for the night. The heavy iron chains have rattled into place. You are safe inside the walls, but the safety feels very cold. To your left, a small light moves. It is a guard carrying a horn lantern. This is a very clever tool. It is a candle set inside a frame made from the horn of the cow. The horn has been scraped so thin that it is clear, like a hazy window. It keeps the wind from blowing the candle out, but it also makes the light soft and yellow. The guard walks slowly. You can hear the crunch of his boots on the frozen ground. He does not see you. He is looking at the snow. The air here has a special smell. It is not like the air in a house today. It smells of wet earth, old stone, and the fat from the candles. There is also the smell of horses from the nearby stables. It is a heavy animal smell that feels warm in your nose, even if the air is freezing. You take a deep breath. The cold air feels like a drink of ice water going down your throat. You walk toward the main door of the castle. The stones under your feet are uneven. They are worn smooth from many years of people walking here. In some places there is a thin layer of ice. You have to walk carefully so you do not slip. The walls of the castle rise high above you. They look black against the snowy sky. These walls were built to be very strong. In most places, the stone is 10 or 12 feet thick. This was a great way to keep enemies out. No battering ram could break through stone that thick. But tonight, those walls are doing something else. They are holding the cold inside. A stone wall is a strange thing. During the long sunny days of summer, it stays cool. But during the deep winter, the stone drinks up the frost. Once the stone gets cold, it stays cold for a long time. It is like being inside a giant box made of ice. Even if the sun comes out tomorrow, the inside of this castle will still feel like a winter morning. You reach the heavy oak door. It is thick and has iron studs all over it. You push it open. The hinges make a long, slow groan. It is a tired sound, like the building is talking to you. You step inside, and the sound of the wind stops instantly. The silence is very deep. It is the kind of silence that makes you want to hold your breath. For a moment, you just stand there. You let your eyes get used to the dark. The only light comes from a few torches held in iron rings on the wall. The flames are orange and red. They jump and pull at the shadows. The hallway is long and made of grey stone. There are no carpets here. There are no soft things at all. Everything is hard and cold and grey. You look down at your hands. You can see your breath rising in a pale cloud. It hangs in the air for a second before it fades away. It is so cold in here that the air you breathe out turns to mist. You pull your cloak tighter around your neck. The wool is scratchy, but it is warm. Medieval people loved wool. They knew it was the best way to stay alive when the frost came. They wore many layers of it. You can feel the weight of your own layers now. It makes you feel a bit like a bear in winter. You begin to walk down the hallway. Your boots make a loud thud-thud sound on the floor. It feels like the whole castle is listening to you. The walls are wet. You reach out and touch the stone. It feels slick and slimy. This is because the warm air from your breath hits the frozen stone and turns into tiny drops of water. This water will freeze into ice by the middle of the night. As you walk, you pass a small window. It is not a window like we have today. It is just a narrow slit in the stone. It is very thin, just wide enough for an archer to shoot an arrow through. There is no glass in it. A sharp wind whistles through the slit. It feels like a needle of ice poking at your skin. You move past it quickly. You are heading toward the center of the castle. This is where the Great Hall is. You hope there is a fire there. In the medieval world, the fire was the heart of the home. It was the only place where the cold could not win. Without a fire, a castle was just a big, empty cave. You pause at a corner, you listen. Somewhere far away, you hear a dog bark. Then you hear the faint sound of wood snapping in a fire. It is a friendly, crackling sound. It makes you feel a little bit better. You start to walk again, following the sound. The hallway opens up into a bigger space. The ceiling is very high. It is lost in the dark above you. You can see the smoke from the torches curling up into the shadows. The air here feels a bit thicker. It smells more of wood smoke now. This is the smell of the night shift. While the world outside sleeps under the snow, the people inside the castle are busy trying to stay warm. You think about the people who built these walls. They did not have machines. They moved these giant stones with their own hands. They built this place to last forever, and it has. But tonight, it feels like the stone is the boss. It decides how cold you are. It decides how much light you get. You stop for a moment of silence. You do not move. You do not breathe loudly. You just listen to the castle. You can hear the wind far above on the roof. You can hear the tiny sound of a mouse scurrying behind a tapestry. You can hear the slow drip of water from the ceiling. The castle is alive in its own way. It is a slow, cold life. You see a door ahead. There is a yellow light glowing under it. That must be the hall. You walk toward it, feeling the weight of the night on your shoulders. The journey through the castle has only just started. There are many more rooms to see and many more stories to hear. You take one more deep breath of the misty air. Your fingers are starting to feel numb, but you know that warmth is close. You push the next door open and prepare to see the flickering heart of the castle. You move closer to the wall and place your hand flat against the grey stone. It is so cold that it almost feels like it is burning your skin. This is the great paradox of the castle. These walls were built to be your best friend. They were made to keep out the rain, the howling wind, and the armies of enemies who might want to come inside. But in the middle of winter, the stone turns into a different kind of enemy. It becomes a thief. It reaches out into the room and steals every little bit of warmth you have. When you look closely at the wall by the light of your flickering torch, you see that it is not just one big piece of rock. It is made of thousands of smaller stones, all fitted together like a giant puzzle. Some are big and square, while others are small and jagged. Between them is a crusty, white material called mortar. This is a mix of lime, sand, and water that turns as hard as rock when it dries. It holds the whole building together. Without it, the castle would simply fall down like a pile of children's blocks. Here is a simple fact about these buildings. Most castle walls in this part of the world were between 6 and 15 feet thick. That is as wide as a large van or a small room. You might think that stone that thick would keep the heat inside, like a thick coat. But stone does not work that way. Stone is what people call a heat sink. This means it is very good at soaking up the temperature around it. During the summer, the walls soak up the sun and keep the rooms inside nice and cool. But during the autumn, the walls soak up the frost. By the time the snow starts to fall, the stone is like a giant block of ice. It stays cold all night and all day. It does not matter how many fires you light. The stone will always be colder than you are. You walk a little further, and you notice a small carving in one of the stones. It looks like a little star with 6 points. This is a mason's mark. A mason is a person who works with stone. In the medieval world, these workers moved from castle to build these giant walls. Each worker had his own special mark, like a star, a cross, or a little bird. When he finished a stone, he would carve his mark into it. This was his way of saying, "I made this." At the end of the week, he would count up all the stones with his mark so he could get paid his wages. It is a tiny human detail in a place that feels so big and cold. You trace the lines of the star with your thumb. It feels rough and dusty. You think about the man who carved it hundreds of years ago. He probably had cold fingers too. He probably stood right where you are standing, wishing for the sun to come up. The hallway is very long and the ceiling is so high that you cannot see it. It is just a black void above you. The air feels heavy. Because the walls are so thick, there is nowhere for the moisture to go. When you breathe out, the wetness in your breath hits the cold stone and stays there. You can see the walls sweating. Tiny drops of water run down the stone in long, slow lines. In the darkest corners, where the torchlight does not reach, these drops turn into thin sheets of ice. If you look at the floor near the wall, you can see a fringe of white frost that looks like powdered glass. You stop walking for a moment. You want to feel the weight of the building. You close your eyes and stand perfectly still. The silence is very heavy. In a modern house, you might hear the hum of a fridge or the sound of a heater. But here, there is nothing. You are surrounded by millions of tons of stone. You can feel the pressure of it all around you. It feels solid and safe, but it also feels like the castle is waiting for something. It is a very deep, old silence. It is the sound of time passing. You can almost feel the heartbeat of the castle, slow and steady, hidden deep inside the rocks. You open your eyes and continue walking. The torch on the wall behind you is getting smaller, and the one ahead is just a tiny orange spark. Between them is a pocket of deep shadow. As you step into the dark, the cold feels even sharper. Without the light of the fire, the darkness feels like it has a weight of its own. It presses against your cloak. You can feel the chill creeping up through the soles of your boots. The stone floor is just as thick as the walls, and it is just as cold. As you move, you pass an archway. The stones here are carved into beautiful shapes. They curve over your head like the branches of a tree. This took a very long time to make. A mason had to use a hammer and a chisel, which is a sharp metal tool for cutting stone, to make these shapes. They wanted the castle to be pretty, even if it was a fortress. You see a bit of colour on the stone. It is a tiny patch of red paint that has mostly flaked away. Long ago, these walls might have been painted with bright colours. They weren't always just grey and dull, but the damp and the cold are not kind to paint. Over the years, the winter has licked the walls clean, leaving only the bare stone behind. You reach a part of the wall where the stone feels different. It is smoother here, almost like glass. This is where people have leaned or rubbed their hands as they walked by for hundreds of years. The oil from their skin has polished the stone. It is a ghost track of all the people who lived here before you. You think about the night shift, workers, the guards, the servants, the messengers. They all walked this same path. They all felt this same cold. It makes the castle feel a little bit less lonely. You see a glimmer of light ahead. It is not the flickering light of a torch, but a steadier, more golden glow. It is coming from a large set of double doors at the end of the corridor. As you get closer, you start to feel a change in the air. It is very slight, but it is there. The air is moving. It feels a little bit less like a stagnant cave and a little bit more like a living room. You can hear a low, rhythmic sound. It is the roar of a very large fire. You stop one last time before you reach the doors. You look back at the long grey hallway you have just walked through. The thick stone walls stand tall and silent, guarding the secrets of the past. They are strong enough to last 1,000 years, but they are too cold to ever be truly comfortable. You turn back to the golden light. You are ready to leave the damp silence of the stone and find the heart of the castle. You reach out for the heavy iron handle of the door. It is cold, of course, but you know that on the other side, the night shift is in full swing around the great hall fire. You push the heavy double doors open, and for a moment you are blinded. After the thin orange light of the torches in the hallway, the great hall feels like a world of gold. The light here is thick and bright. It does not just flicker, it glows. It is a warm, deep light that comes from the very center of the room. You step inside, and the first thing you notice is the sound. It is a great, hungry roar. It is the sound of the castle's heart beating. This room is the biggest space you have ever seen. The ceiling is so high up that it is lost in a soft grey haze of smoke. The walls are lined with long wooden tables where people eat their meals during the day. But now, in the middle of the night, the tables are pushed back. The floor is covered in dried plants called rushes. They are like long pieces of straw, mixed with dried herbs like lavender. When you walk on them, they make a soft, crunching sound, and the sweet, dusty smell rises up to meet you. In the very middle of this giant room sits the hearth. A hearth is just a big flat area made of thick stones where the fire lives. In many older castles, the fire did not sit against a wall in a fireplace with a chimney. Instead, it sat right in the middle of the floor. There is a hole high up in the roof to let the smoke out, but the smoke does not like to leave. It hangs in the air like a thin curtain, making everything look soft and blurry. You walk toward the fire, and as you get closer, the cold of the stone hallway begins to melt away. At first, your skin feels tight and tingly. It is the feeling of your blood starting to move again. Then, a wave of real heat hits you. It is like a physical weight pressing against your chest. It feels wonderful. You stop about 10 feet away and just stand there, letting the heat soak into your heavy wool cloak. The fire is huge. It is made of logs as thick as a man's leg. They are mostly oak and ash wood, which burn for a long time and give off a lot of heat. The flames are tall and jagged, reaching up toward the ceiling. They are every color you can imagine. Bright yellow at the tips, deep orange in the middle, and a glowing, angry red at the bottom where the coals are. Every now and then, a log snaps with a sound like a small gun going off. When it snaps, a cloud of tiny gold sparks flies up into the air. You look down at the base of the fire and see a special tool. These are called fire dogs. They are also known as andirons. They are heavy iron stands that look a bit like little dogs with long necks. The logs sit on top of these iron dogs. This is a very clever way to build a fire. By holding the logs up off the floor, air can slide underneath them. Fire needs to breathe just like you do. With air moving under the wood, the flames grow much hotter and stronger. Without these iron dogs, the fire would just smoulder and smoke, and the castle would be much colder. Here is a simple fact about the fires in these big halls. They almost never went out. During the winter, it was someone's job to make sure the hearth always had a glow. If the fire died completely, it would take a long time to get the big logs burning again, and the room would turn into an icebox in just an hour. The fire was the most important thing in the castle. It was more important than the gold in the chests or the swords in the armory. You move a few steps closer. Now the heat is so strong that you have to squint your eyes. Your face feels hot, almost like you are standing in the sun on a summer day. You reach up and pull back your hood. The air on your neck feels warm and dry. You can smell the sap inside the wood as it boils and hisses. It smells like the forest, deep and earthy. But then, you notice something strange. While your face and your chest are very hot, your back is still shivering. The heat from the fire moves out in a straight line, but it does not wrap around you. The cold air from the rest of the hall is still pressing against your spine. It is a very odd feeling to be half cooked and half frozen at the same time. You turn around slowly, like a piece of meat on a string, to let the fire warm your back. You can feel the chill leaving your shoulders, but then your face starts to feel the cold again. This was the constant dance of the medieval night. You are always turning, always moving, trying to find a balance between the flame and the frost. You look up at the rafters, the big wooden beams that hold up the roof. They are black with the soot from centuries of fires. Soot is the black dust that smoke leaves behind. You watch the sparks from the fire as they float upward. They look like tiny stars. They rise higher and higher, dancing in the hot air, until they vanish into the dark. This is a moment for silence. You stand perfectly still in front of the roaring hearth. You do not hear the wind anymore. You do not hear the guards outside. All you hear is the rhythmic breathing of the fire. Woof, crackle, hiss. It is a very old sound. It is the same sound the people have listened to since the beginning of time. It makes you feel very small, but it also makes you feel safe. As long as the fire is roaring, the winter cannot get you. You look around the edges of the light. The great hall is so big that the fire cannot reach the corners. In the shadows, you can see the shapes of the high windows. They are covered with wooden shutters tonight to keep the snow out. You can see the heavy tapestries on the walls, but you cannot see the pictures on them. They are just dark shapes that shiver when a draught of wind finds its way inside. There are shadows moving near the walls. These are the people of the night shift. You see a young boy carrying a large basket of logs. He is small and his clothes are simple, made of rough brown wool. He moves quietly, his eyes fixed on the hearth. He walks to the edge of the fire and carefully places a new log on the iron fire dogs. He does not stay to get warm. He turns and heads back into the shadows to get more wood. He is like a small shadow serving a giant golden king. You realize that this fire is more than just heat. It is a light in a very dark world. Outside the castle walls, the forest is black and the snow is deep. There are walls in the woods and ice on the rivers. But here, inside this circle of gold, there is life. The smell of the oak smoke fills your lungs. It is a dry, clean smell that hides the dampness of the stone. You take a deep breath and feel your heart rate slow down. The tension in your shoulders, which has been there since you stepped into the cold hallway, finally starts to go away. You feel heavy and sleepy. The heat is like a warm blanket wrapping around you. But you know you cannot stay here forever. The Great Hall is just one part of the castle, and there is much more to see. You take one last look at the dancing flames, memorizing the way they move, before you prepare to follow the warmth to its source and see who else is awake in this fortress of stone and shadow. You stand at the edge of the fire's light and you decide to play a small game. You want to see exactly where the warmth ends. You take one slow step backward, away from the glowing logs. The heat on your face stays strong. You take another step. Now you can feel the air start to change. It is like there is an invisible line drawn on the floor. On one side of the line, the world is golden and toasty. On the other side, the cold is waiting to grab you. You take a third step back. Suddenly, the warmth vanishes. It does not fade away slowly. It drops off like you have stepped off a cliff into a cold lake. The air here is sharp again. The heat from that massive fire is like a bubble. If you are inside the bubble, you are safe. If you are outside of it, you might as well be standing in the snow in the courtyard. This is what people call the heat circle. In a giant room like the Great Hall, the fire is very powerful, but it is not big enough to warm the whole space. It only warms a small ring of air around the hearth. You look down at the floor. The rushes, those dried plants spread over the stone, look different here. Near the fire, they are a warm sandy colour. They look dry and soft, but just a few feet away, past the edge of the heat circle, they look grey and flat. You reach down and touch a handful of the rushes outside the circle. They feel damp. There is a tiny bit of frost on them that has not melted all day. This is the reality of life in the castle. Most of the floor is a frozen waste. Only the small patch near the fire is a place where you can sit without shivering. Here is a simple fact about these medieval fires. Because the hearth is in the middle of the room, most of the heat goes straight up. Heat likes to rise, like a bird flying to the sky. High above your head, there is a hole in the roof called a louver. It is a wooden frame with slats that let the smoke out. But as the smoke goes out, it takes almost all the warmth with it. It is like trying to heat a house with the front door wide open. Only about 10% of the heat from those giant logs actually stays down here with you. The rest of just escapes into the night sky to warm the stars. You see a strange object sitting on a stone ledge near the hearth. It is a big, heavy bowl made of copper. It has a handle on top and little holes punched in the sides. This is a very important tool called a couvre-feu. That is a French word that means cover fire. In English, we call it a curfew bell. In the medieval world, when it was time for everyone to go to sleep, a bell would ring in the town or the castle. That was the curfew. The Fire Warden would take this big copper bowl and place it right over the glowing coals of the fire. The little holes let just a tiny bit of air in so the coals wouldn't die, but the bowl kept the fire from growing or spreading while people slept. It also kept sparks from flying onto the rushes on the floor. This was very important because the rushes were very dry. One little spark could start a fire that would burn the whole castle down in minutes. So the curfew bell was a way to keep the fire asleep until the morning. You touch the side of the copper bowl. It is warm, but not hot. It feels solid and safe. You turn back toward the fire and step back into the heat circle. The change is instant. It feels like someone has draped a heavy, warm velvet coat over your shoulders. Your skin relaxes. You can feel the tension leaving your jaw. You look at the dust motes, those tiny specks of dust floating in the air. In the bright light of the fire, they look like little bits of gold. They dance and spin in the rising heat, caught in the invisible breath of the flames. Now, take a moment for silence. Don't move. Just watch the line where the light meets the dark. You can see the shadows of the tables stretching out across the floor. They look like long, thin fingers reaching for the corners of the hall. The only sound is the soft cruick of the wood and the distant moan of the wind against the roof tiles. It is a very peaceful moment. You are in a tiny island of light in a sea of darkness. The whole world feels like it has stopped moving. You notice how the light behaves at the edge of the circle. It does not just stop, it fights. The orange light pushes against the blue-grey shadows of the hall. It is a battle that happens every night. The fire tries to fill the room, and the shadows try to squeeze the fire out. When the Fire Warden adds a fresh log, the light wins for a moment, and the circle grows wider. When the log burns down, the shadows creep back in, inch by inch, narrowing your world until it is just you and the glowing embers. You think about the people who have to work outside of this circle, the servants who carry the wine, the guards who stand at the doors, the dogs who are not allowed near the hearth. They live in a world of perpetual winter. They might see the fire from far away, but they never feel its kiss. They have to rely on their thick wool clothes and their own busy movement to keep their blood from freezing. To them, the heat circle is like a kingdom they can see but cannot enter. You look at your own shadow on the floor. It is huge. It stretches all the way to the far wall. Because the fire is so low on the ground, your shadow looks like a giant. It moves when you move, swaying in the flickering light. It reminds you that even here, in the safest part of the castle, the dark is always a part of you. You cannot have the light without the shadow. The air inside the circle is very dry. It makes your eyes feel a little bit scratchy and your throat feel thirsty. But outside the circle, the air is wet and heavy. You can see the difference if you look at the stones of the far walls. They look shiny and slick with moisture, but the stones near the fire are bone dry and dusty. This change in the air creates a draught, a moving current of wind. The hot air rises up to the roof, and the cold air from the windows and doors rushes in to take its place. This means that even if you are standing near the fire, you can often feel a cold breeze hitting your ankles. It is like the cold is trying to find a way into the heat circle, sneaking across the floor like a thief. You sit down on a low wooden bench near the hearth. The wood of the bench is warm to the touch. You stretch your legs out toward the flames. Your boots are starting to dry out from the snow outside. You can see a little bit of steam rising from the leather. It smells like wet cowhide and wood smoke. It is a cozy smell, the smell of a traveler who has finally found a place to rest. You realize that the heat circle is the most social place in the castle. During the evening, this is where people gather to talk and share news. They huddle close, shoulder to shoulder, because that is the only way to stay warm. Rank and status still matter, but the cold is a great equalizer. Everyone needs the fire. Everyone respects the circle. You look at the empty space around you and imagine it filled with people in colorful wool robes, their faces glowing in the firelight, their voices humming like a hive of bees. But now, it is late. The hall is mostly empty. The heat circle belongs to you in the night shift. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for this small ring of warmth. It is a fragile thing, held together by wood and air, but it is the most valuable thing you have found so far. You watch the flames for a bit longer, feeling the rhythm of the castle in your bones. The circle is holding. The winter is kept at bay. You take one last long look at the golden light before you decide it is time to move on and see the man whose job it is to keep this circle alive. You are sitting on the warm wooden bench, but your eyes start to wander toward a shadow moving on the other side of the hearth. At first, you think it is just the light playing tricks on you, but then a man steps out from the darkness. He is old, and his back is a little bit bent from many years of hard work. He is wearing a long tunic of thick, dark wool. It is covered in grey ash and black soot. His hands are rough and brown, with deep lines that look like the bark of an old tree. This is the Fire Warden. While the Lord and the Lady and the knights sleep in their beds, this man stays awake. He is the guardian of the flame. The Fire Warden does not say a word to you. He does not need to. He has a very big job to do, and he does it with a lot of care. He walks over to a large pile of wood stacked against the stone wall. He picks up a log that looks far too heavy for a man of his age, but he carries it easily. He knows exactly which log to pick. He chooses a piece of oak. Oak is a very good wood because it is dense and heavy. It does not burn away in a flash like pine or birch. It settles in and glows for hours, giving off a deep, steady heat. He carries the log to the fire and places it on the iron fire dogs. He does not just throw it on. He sets it down gently, making sure there is a gap for the air to move. Then he reaches for a special tool leaning against the hearth. It is made of 2 pieces of wood with a leather bag in the middle and a metal nose. This is called a bellows. You watch as he pulls the handles apart and pushes them back together. Whoosh, whoosh. The leather bag puffs out and then shrinks. It blows a strong stream of air right into the heart of the fire. The glowing red coals, which were starting to look a bit dusty and grey, suddenly turn bright orange. They look like they are breathing. Small blue flames lick at the bottom of the new oak log. Soon the blue turns to yellow and the wood starts to hiss as the heat finds the sap inside. The Fire Warden watches this closely. He stays until he is sure the log has taken the fire. His face is very close to the heat, but he does not seem to mind. His skin is tough, like old leather that has been near the sun for too long. Here is a simple fact about the night shift in a castle. Many big houses had a rule that the fire must never go out. In some places, the fire in the Great Hall stayed lit for 100 years without ever dying. If the fire went out, it was seen as a very bad sign. It meant the people in the castle were lazy or that bad luck was coming. But more than that, it was a matter of life and death. In the middle of a frozen winter, it could take a long time to start a fire from nothing using flint and steel. Flint is a hard stone, and steel is a piece of metal. When you hit them together, they make a tiny spark. It is very hard to turn that spark into a big fire when the air is damp and your fingers are shaking. So, the fire warden's job was to make sure that never happened. The man moves to a small stool in the corner, just at the edge of the light. He sits down and picks up a small piece of wood and a sharp knife. He begins to whittle, which means he is carving the wood into a shape. He is making a small spoon. His hands move slowly and steadily. He is not in a hurry. He has all night. He listens to the fire the way a mother listens to a sleeping baby. He knows every sound it makes. He knows the difference between a happy crackle and the dangerous pop of the spark jumping onto the rushes. Now, take a long moment for silence. The fire warden has stopped whittling. He is just sitting there, looking at the flames. The only sound is the soft whoosh of the wind in the louver high above, and the slow, rhythmic tick of the burning wood. You can feel the peace of the room. It is a heavy, warm silence. In this moment, the castle feels very small. It is just this room, this fire, and this man. The rest of the world, with its snow and its cold and its wars, feels very far away. You look at the warden's clothes again. He has a small pouch hanging from his belt. Inside, he keeps a bit of charcloth. This is a piece of linen rag that has been burned just a little bit until it is black and crispy. Charcloth is very clever because it catches a spark very easily. If he ever had to start a new fire, he would use this cloth to turn a tiny spark into a glowing ember. He also has a small bundle of tinder. This is a collection of very dry grass, bits of birds' nests, and tiny twigs. He keeps it in a dry leather bag so it never gets damp. This man is a master of fire. He knows how to find heat where other people see only cold ash. The fire warden looks up at you for a second. His eyes are milky and pale, but they are very sharp. He gives you a tiny nod as if to say you are welcome to stay by his fire. Then he goes back to his spoon. You realize that he is one of the most important people in the whole building. The knights have their swords and the lord has his gold, but this man has the warmth. Without him, the castle would be a tomb. Every person sleeping in the rooms above is safe because this man is awake. He is like a clock that never stops ticking. You see a small pot sitting on a flat stone near the edge of the hearth. It is a little iron pot with a lid. The warden reaches out with a piece of thick cloth and moves the pot a little closer to the coals. He is heating up his midnight meal. It is likely a simple porridge or a bit of thick vegetable soup. He does not have a fancy table or a silver spoon. He eats here, by the fire, where he can keep an eye on his work. The smell of the soup begins to mix with the smell of the oak smoke. It is a humble, salty smell that makes you feel hungry. The warden stands up again. He takes a long iron pole with a hook on the end. This is a fire fork. He uses it to push the logs around. He moves a half-burned log from the back to the front. He is managing the fire. He wants to make sure every bit of wood is used well. He is like a gardener, but his plants are made of flame. He knows that if he just leaves the logs alone, they will burn out too fast or leave big gaps where the cold air can get in. You watch him work and you feel a deep respect for him. His life is spent in the shadows and the heat. He does not get prizes or medals. Most people in the castle probably don't even know his name, but he carries the weight of the whole night on his bent shoulders. He is the one who keeps the shadows from growing too long. He is the one who makes sure the morning comes to a warm house. As you sit there, you start to feel very sleepy. The warmth of the fire and the quiet movements of the warden are like a lullaby, but you know you cannot sleep here. You are a visitor to this night shift, and there is more to see. You want to know where the heat goes when it leaves this room. You want to see the chambers where the fires are smaller and the blankets are thicker. You stand up from the bench. The fire warden does not look up. He is busy blowing the bellows again. Whoosh, whoosh. The light grows a bit brighter, casting his long, thin shadow against the far wall. You walk toward the doors, leaving the guardian of the flame behind. You can hear the memory of his rough hands and his bright orange coals with you. You are moving away from the heart of the fire now, heading toward the stairs and the quiet rooms where the rest of the castle is dreaming. The air starts to feel a bit thinner as you leave the Great Hall, but you feel stronger because you've seen the man who keeps the winter at bay. You walk out of the Great Hall and back into the long grey corridor. The heat of the big fire is already starting to fade from your skin. As you walk, you notice that the castle is divided into different zones of warmth. It is not just about being near a fire, it is about who you are and where you are allowed to stand. This is the hierarchy of warmth. In the medieval world, heat was just like gold or land. The more important you were, the more of it you got to keep for yourself. You see a small group of people standing near a doorway. They are servants who have just finished their work in the kitchens. They are huddled together, their arms crossed over their chests. They are far away from the Great Hall fire. They are allowed to come into the hall to bring food or wood, but they cannot stay there to get warm. That space is reserved for the Lord, his family, and his important guests. For the servants, the night is spent in the outer chill. They have to rely on their own bodies and their rough wool clothes to stay alive. Here is a simple fact about castle life. Where you slept and where you stood was decided by your rank. The lord and lady had the warmest rooms, usually high up in the castle where the rising heat from the lower floors could reach them. The knights and the important officers had rooms with their own small fireplaces. But the servants, the cooks, and the stable hands often slept on the floor in the hallways or in the corners of the kitchens. They were at the bottom of the hierarchy, which meant they were the coldest people in the building. You walk past a large arched opening that leads to a smaller room. This is a sola, a private room for the noble family. Inside, you can see a much smaller fireplace. It is not like the giant hearth in the middle of the Great Hall. It is built into the wall, with a stone hood above it to catch the smoke. This is a more modern way of heating a room. It is much more efficient because the fire is contained and the heat reflects off the stone back into the room. But even here, the warmth is a prize. Only the family and their closest friends are allowed inside this room. You look at the floor of the corridor. In some places there are small mats made of woven straw. These are not for decoration. They are there to keep your feet off the frozen stone. If you are a high-ranking person, you might have a thick rug made of wool or even a fur skin on the floor of your chamber. But here in the hallway, the servants walk on the bare stone or on a thin layer of dirty rushes. You can see how the cold moves from the floor, through the shoes, and into the bones. It is a slow, steady ache that never really goes away for the people who work the night shift. Near the stairs, you see a small iron basket held up on a pole. Inside the basket, there are some glowing coals. This is a cresset. It is a simple tool used to provide a little bit of light and a tiny bit of heat in the darker parts of the castle. It is not much, but for a guard standing watch, it is everything. You see a guard leaning toward the cresset, holding his hands over the glowing coals. His fingers are red and swollen from the cold. His fingers are red and swollen from the cold. This is called chilblains. It happens when your skin gets very cold and then warms up too fast. It is very painful and itchy. The guard rubs his hands together, trying to get the blood moving. He is a part of the middle rank, better off than the kitchen boy, but far from the comfort of the Lord. Now, take a moment for silence. The guard has moved away, and you are alone by the stairs. You can hear the silence of the hierarchy. It is the sound of many people sleeping in many different levels of comfort. You can hear a soft snore from a servant sleeping behind a curtain. You can hear the heavy, slow breath of the guard as he walks away. Everyone is tucked into their own place in the castle's layer cake of warmth. It is a very orderly sort of quiet. You notice a heavy curtain hanging over a doorway. It is made of thick, dark green wool. You pull it aside just a little bit and peek in. This is a room for the squire's young men, who are training to be knights. They are sleeping on narrow wooden beds. They have thick wool blankets, but no fire. Their warmth comes from being together in one room and from the heavy blankets. This is the middle ground. They are not freezing like the people in the stables, but they are not toasty like the Lord. They are learning to endure the cold as part of their training. They must be tough if they want to wear armor one day. There is a specific tool you see sitting on a chest near the squire's door. It is a small brazier. A brazier is a metal pan on legs that holds hot coals. It is like a portable heater. A servant would bring this into a room to take the chill off the air, but because it uses coals, it can be dangerous. It produces a gas that you cannot see or smell, which can make you very sleepy and sick if there is no fresh air. The squires only use it for a little while before they blow the coals out. It is a luxury of their rank, even if it is a small one. You think about the people at the very top of the hierarchy. The lord and lady have beds with big curtains that they can pull shut. This creates a tiny warm room inside the big cold room. They have furs from bears and wolves to keep them warm. They have servants who bring them hot drinks and warm their beds with pans of coals. Their life in winter is almost like a different world compared to the life of the boy you saw earlier, carrying the heavy logs. But even for the Lord, the hierarchy of warmth is a struggle. If the wind blows from the north, even the best fire in the solar cannot keep the frost from the windows. The cold is a giant that everyone has to fight, no matter how much money they have. The difference is that the Lord has better weapons. He has the best wood, the thickest walls, and the most blankets. The hierarchy is a way of deciding who gets to survive the winter with the least amount of pain. You start to climb the spiral stairs. The stones here are even colder because they are further away from the great hall fire. As you go up, you are moving through the different levels of the castle's social ladder. Each floor feels a little different. The air gets a bit thinner. The smells of the kitchen and the hall fade away, replaced by the smell of old wood and dry fabric. You pass a small landing where a servant is curled up on a pile of straw. He has a single thin blanket. He is sleeping right against the wall. You wonder why he would sleep there, against the cold stone. Then you realize that on the other side of that wall is the chimney for the great hall fire. The stone there is just a tiny bit warmer than the rest of the walls. It is not much, but for him, it is the best spot in the castle. He has found a leak in the hierarchy of warmth, a little bit of heat that was meant for the Lord but escaped into the stone. You continue your climb, feeling the weight of the night. You are heading toward the upper chambers, where the fabric is thicker and the rooms are smaller. You are moving toward the places where the castle tries to hide from its own cold stone. You think about the guard, the squires, and the sleeping servant. They are all parts of this big stone machine, and the fuel that keeps the machine running is not just wood, but the heat that moves from person to person, floor to floor, until it reaches the very top. You reach the next door and prepare to see how the castle uses cloth to fight the battle that the stone is losing. You reach the top of the stairs and step onto a wide landing. The area here is very still. It feels different from the hallway downstairs. Down there, the stone was bare and wet, but here, the walls are covered in something soft. You reach out your hand and touch the wall, but you do not feel the cold, slimy stone. Instead, you feel thick, rough wool. This is a tapestry. To a person today, a tapestry is just a pretty picture made of thread, but to the people living in this castle, these heavy cloths are the most important tools they own. They are like giant blankets for the walls. These tapestries are very big. They hang from the ceiling all the way down to the floor. They are so thick that they feel heavy when you try to push them. They are made by weaving coloured wool threads together on a big wooden frame. It takes a very long time to make just one. A group of weavers might work for a whole year to finish a single tapestry. Because they take so much work, they cost a lot of money. Only the richest lords can afford to cover their walls like this. As you look at the tapestry in the flickering light of your torch, you see a picture of a forest. There are tall green trees and little white flowers. You can see a hunter on a brown horse chasing a stag with big antlers. The colours are deep and rich dark greens, bright reds, and earthy browns. In the middle of a grey frozen winter, these pictures remind the people that summer will come back. It is a way to bring the woods and the sun inside the castle, even when the ground outside is buried under 3 feet of snow. Here is a simple fact about these wall hangings. They were not just for decoration. In the medieval world, tapestries were used as mobile walls. When a lord moved from one castle to another, he did not leave his tapestries behind. His servants would take them down, roll them up tightly, and put them on the backs of mules. They were the most valuable things in the castle because they were the only way to make a stone room feel warm. Without them, the wind would blow right through the cracks in the stone, and the cold would seep into your bones. You notice something interesting about how the tapestry is hung. It does not touch the stone wall directly. There are big iron hooks at the top, and the cloth hangs about 2 or 3 inches away from the stone. This is a very clever trick. By leaving a little space between the cloth and the wall, you create a pocket of dead air. The cold stone stays on one side, and the warmer air of the room stays on the other. This pocket of air acts like a shield. It keeps the dampness of the wall from soaking into the room. You see a small wooden tool sitting on a chest nearby. It is a long, thin stick with a hooked end, made of polished oak. This is a tapestry hook. A servant uses this to reach high up and adjust the cloths, or to pull them back so they can clean behind them. It is a simple tool, but it is used every day. You can see the marks on the handle, where many hands have held it. Now, stand very still and look at the bottom of the tapestry. Do you see that? The heavy cloth is moving. It is swaying back and forth very slowly. It looks like the wall is breathing, but the stone is not breathing. There is a draft of small, cold wind coming through a crack in the masonry behind the cloth. The tapestry is catching the wind like a sail on a boat. If the cloth were not there, that cold air would blow right across your face. Instead, the wool catches the wind and slows it down. The tapestry turns a biting gale into a soft shiver. Take a moment for silence. The only sound is the soft swish-swish of the wool rubbing against the stone. It is a very gentle sound, like a secret being whispered. You can feel the quiet of the upper floors. Downstairs was the world of fire and noise. Up here, it is the world of cloth and shadows. The tapestries soak up the sound just like they soak up the cold. It makes the hallway feel very private and safe. You walk a little further, brushing your shoulder against the forest scene. The wool feels scratchy against your cloak. You can smell the materials used to make the tapestry. It smells of sheep's wool, vegetable dyes made from crushed plants, and a little bit of dust. It is a dry, old smell. It reminds you that this castle has seen many winters. These same tapestries have hung here for 50 years, guarding the people inside from the frost. In the corner, you see a tapestry that is a bit different. It is not a picture of a forest. It shows a tall castle with golden towers and blue flags. This is a heraldic tapestry. It shows the signs and symbols of the family that lives here. It tells everyone who walks by that this is a place of power. But even this grand sign of power is just a way to hide the cold. No matter how much gold or land a lord has, he is still just a man trying to stay warm in a big stone box. You notice that the air near the tapestries feels a bit thicker. It is not as sharp as the air on the stairs. The wool acts like a filter. It holds onto the heat from the day and lets it out slowly during the night. If you were to walk into a room with bare stone walls right now, your skin would feel the difference instantly. You would feel the chill of the tomb. But here, the cloth makes the world feel a bit more human. You think about the night shift workers, whose job it is to look after these cloths. Every morning a servant has to walk through the castle and beat the tapestries with a flat wooden stick. This is to get the dust out. If they didn't do this, the wool would get heavy with dirt and start to smell. In the winter, they also check the back of the cloths to make sure no ice is forming. If a tapestry gets too wet from the sweating stone, it can rot and be ruined. It is a constant battle to keep the cloth dry and the room warm. You reach the end of the landing. There is a heavy wooden door ahead of you. It leads to the sleeping chambers. You look back at the long row of tapestries. In the dim light of your torch, the hunters and the horses look like they are moving. The forest seems deep and mysterious. You feel a sense of gratitude for the weavers and the sheep. Without them, this hallway would be a frozen tunnel. The tapestries are the castle's secret weapon. They are soft and pretty, but they are as strong as any suit of armor when it comes to fighting the winter. They turn the cold stone into a home. You turn the iron handle of the door, feeling the weight of the woolen walls behind you. You are leaving the forest of thread and heading toward the rooms where the real sleep happens. The air gets even quieter as you push the door open, moving deeper into the heart of the medieval night. You leave the soft, muffled world of the tapestries and step into a much narrower passage. This is a back staircase, a spiral of stone that winds up into one of the smaller towers. There are no wall hangings here. The stone is bare and rough, and the air is so cold it feels like a physical weight on your chest. Downstairs, the great hall felt alive with the roar of the fire. Here, the only sound is the wind screaming against the outside of the tower. It sounds like a wild animal trying to find a way through the rocks. This staircase is built into the very edge of the castle wall. The steps are narrow at one end and wide at the other, like a fan made of stone. They are called winders. You have to be very careful where you put your feet. The middle of each step is worn down into a shallow bowl shape. Thousands of feet have walked here over hundreds of years, slowly grinding the stone away. In the thin light of your torch, the shadows of the steps look like long, dark teeth. Here is a simple fact about these spiral stairs. Almost all of them in a castle turn to the right as you go up. This was not an accident. Most people are right-handed. If an enemy tried to fight his way up the stairs, his sword arm would be blocked by the central stone pillar. But the person defending the castle, coming down the stairs, would have plenty of room to swing his sword. Even in the middle of a quiet winter night, the building is still thinking about war. The very shape of the stairs is a weapon. The air in this part of the tower is very damp. You can see big patches of salt growing on the stones. This is called efflorescence. It looks like white, fuzzy hair or a thin layer of snow, but it is actually salt that the water has pulled out of the rocks. It feels crunchy and dry if you touch it. It shows you just how much water is hidden inside these thick walls. In the winter, this water turns into ice, and the salt grows even more. You reach a small landing and stop for a moment. There is a tiny window here, no more than a hand's width across. It has no glass, just a thin piece of translucent horn held in a wooden frame. Horn is a very clever material. It comes from the outer shell of a cow's horn. It is soaked in water for weeks until it gets soft. Then it is pressed flat and scraped until it is thin enough to let a little light through. It is not clear like glass, but it keeps the snow out. You can see the shadow of the falling flakes moving behind the yellow horn. It looks like a ghostly dance. Take a moment for silence. Stand perfectly still on the cold stone. You can hear the tower singing. The wind is moving so fast over the top of the stone chimneys that it makes a deep humming sound. It vibrates through the floor and into the soles of your boots. It is a low, lonely sound. Up here, away from the kitchen and the great hall, you realize how small you are. The castle is a giant, and you are just a tiny speck inside its stone skin. You notice a small niche, little hole in the wall next to a heavy door. Inside the niche sits a simple tool. It is a small pottery lamp, shaped like a little shoe. It is filled with stinking fish oil and has a wick made of twisted hemp. Hemp is a rough plant fiber that burns slowly. This is a cranny lamp. A servant would leave this here so that anyone walking the stairs at night wouldn't fall in the dark. The flame is tiny and blue, and it gives off more smell than light. It smells of old grease and salt, but in this freezing tunnel, that little flame looks as bright as the sun. You reach out and touch the central pillar of the stairs. It is made of one long piece of stone that goes from the bottom of the tower to the top. It feels solid and immovable, but the cold is moving through it. You can feel the chill of the earth itself coming up through the rock. In the medieval world, they believed the earth was cold and dry. They thought the winter was a time when the earth tried to take everything back into itself. Looking at these bare stones, you can see why they felt that way. You pass a heavy door made of silver-grey oak. It is the door to a storehouse. You can smell what is inside. It smells of dried apples, smoked ham, and big sacks of grain. This is the castle's life chest. If the snow gets so deep that no one can leave for a month, the food in this room will keep everyone alive. The cold in the tower is actually helpful here. It acts like a giant fridge, keeping the meat from going bad and the apples from rotting. The night shift workers who check these stores have to be very careful not to let any mice inside. A single mouse could eat enough grain to feed a man for a week. The staircase gets even narrower as you climb. You have to turn your shoulders to fit through the tight space. The air is getting thinner and colder. You are high up in the tower now, close to the roof. You can hear the wooden rafters groaning under the weight of the snow outside. It is a slow, creaking sound, like a big ship at sea. The wood is moving as the temperature changes, popping and snapping in the dark. You see a small pile of grey sand in the corner of a step. You look up and see a tiny hole in the ceiling. This is where the mortar between the stones is starting to crumble. Every winter, the ice gets into the cracks and pushes the stones apart just a tiny bit. Over hundreds of years, the castle is slowly turning back into dust. The night shift masons will have a lot of work to do when the spring thaw comes. They will have to fill these gaps with fresh lime and sand to keep the tower strong. You reach the top of the stairs. There is a small wooden landing here, and the floor feels a bit softer than the stone. You can feel a tiny bit of heat coming from under the door ahead. This is a good sign. It means someone has been tending a small fire or a brazier inside. You pause to catch your breath. Your lungs feel tight from the climb and the freezing air. Your fingers are tucked deep into your sleeves, but they are still numb. You look back down into the dark spiral of the stairs. The light from your torch only goes down a few steps before the darkness swallows it. It feels like you are standing on the edge of the world. The castle is a labyrinth of these cold, dark tubes, connecting the warm rooms like veins in a body. You turn back to the door. It is small and low, and you will have to stoop to go through it. You are leaving the bare stone behind and moving toward the chambers where people try to find comfort in the middle of the night. You reach for the iron ring on the door, ready to see the secrets of the sleeping rooms. You push open the small, low door at the top of the tower stairs. You have to bend your head to fit through. As you step inside, the air changes. It is still cold, but it is not moving. The howling wind of the staircase is gone. This is a bedchamber. It is a square room with stone walls, but these walls are covered in dark wood panels. The wood feels much friendlier than the bare stone. In the corner, a small fireplace holds a few glowing coals. They give off a soft red light that makes the room look like it is filled with shadows. The biggest thing in the room is the bed. It is a massive wooden structure that sits in the very center of the space. It looks like a small house made of oak. It has 4 thick posts at the corners that reach all the way to the ceiling. At the top there is a flat wooden roof called a tester. This is not just for looks. In a medieval castle, the roof was made of wood and tiles, and sometimes little bits of dust or even small bugs would fall from the ceiling. The wooden roof of the bed keeps you safe and clean while you sleep. Hanging from the top of the bed are long, heavy curtains. They are made of thick red wool. Tonight the curtains are pulled shut all the way around the bed. You cannot see the person sleeping inside. You only see a big, soft box of red fabric. This is a room within a room. Outside the curtains, the air in the chamber is freezing. If you put a bowl of water on the table, it might have a layer of ice on it by morning, but inside those thick wall curtains, the air is much warmer. Here is a simple fact about these beds. The curtains were the most important part of the furniture. In the winter, the big stone rooms were impossible to heat. A fire in the fireplace could only do so much. So, people built these beds to trap their own body heat. When you climb into a bed like this and pull the curtains shut, your own breath and the warmth from your skin stay trapped inside the wool. It is like being inside a warm cocoon. The temperature inside the curtains can be 10 degrees warmer than the rest of the room. You walk closer to the bed. The floor is covered in a thick wool rug. This is a great luxury. Most people in the castle sleep on straw or bare stone. But in this room, the floor is soft. It keeps the cold of the earth from reaching your feet. You see a small wooden step stool next to the bed. Medieval beds were built very high off the floor. This was another clever trick. Cold air is heavy and stays low near the ground. By sleeping high up, you stay in the warmer air near the middle of the room. You notice a tool sitting on a small table near the bed. It is a snuffer. It is made of silver and looks like a tiny pair of scissors with a little box on the end. A servant uses this to put out the candles at night. Instead of blowing on the candle and making a mess with the wax, the snuffer clips the burning wick and catches the spark in the little box. It keeps the room from smelling like smoke when you are trying to go to sleep. You pick it up. It feels heavy and cold in your hand. It is a small sign of how much the people here care about their comfort. Now, take a moment for silence. The room is very still. You can hear the slow, rhythmic sound of the person inside the bed breathing. In and out, in and out, in and out. It is a peaceful sound. Outside, the winter is trying to break in. But inside this room, the wood and the wool are winning the battle. You can feel the safety of the space. It feels like the whole world has shrunk down to just this bed and the glowing coals in the hearth. You look at the curtains again. They are decorated with beautiful embroidery. You can see small birds and vines sewn with silk thread. In the dim red light, the birds look like they are sleeping too. The fabric is so thick that it blocks out all the light. If you were inside that bed, it would be pitch black. This helped people sleep better because they didn't have to worry about the flickering shadows from the fire. You think about the night shift servant whose job it was to make the bed. This was not a quick job like it is today. First, they had to fluff up the straw or the feathers inside the mattress. Then they had to lay down linen sheets. Linen feels very cold at first, but it is very smooth and clean. Then came the wool blankets, and finally, a heavy cover made of fur. The servant had to make sure there were no gaps where a draft could get in. They treated the bed like a fortress, building up the walls of fabric to keep the winter out. In the corner of the room, you see a small wooden cradle. It has its own little set of curtains, just like the big bed. This shows you that even the smallest members of the castle had to be protected from the night air. The cradle is on rockers, so it can be pushed back and forth. You can imagine a tired nurse sitting here in the dark, rocking the baby while the wind howls outside the tower walls. The warmth of the room is shared by everyone, from the lord in his big bed to the baby in the cradle. You notice a faint smell in the room. It is not the smoky smell of the great hall. It smells of dried flowers and beeswax. Many people kept small bags of dried herbs like lavender under their pillows. This made the bed smell sweet and helped them relax. It also helped to keep away tiny bugs that might want to live in the wool. It is a clean, gentle smell that makes you feel very sleepy. You walk to the fireplace. The stones around the opening are carved with little flowers. The fire is almost gone, but the stones are still holding on to the heat. This is why the fireplace was built into the wall. The stone soaks up the warmth from the flames and then slowly lets it out into the room all night long. It is like a big stone heater that never stops working. The fire warden must have come by an hour ago to bank the coals, which means he covered them with ash to keep them from burning out too fast. You look back at the big canopy bed. It stands in the middle of the room like a silent guardian. It represents the best technology the medieval world had for staying warm. It didn't need machines or electricity. It just needed wood, wool, and the clever idea to trap the heat of the human body. It is a very simple way to survive, but it worked for hundreds of years. You feel a sense of calm in this room. The high tower felt lonely and scary, but here, everything is built for rest. You are moving away from the bare stone of the fortress and into the soft heart of the home. You take one last look at the red curtains, feeling the warmth they hold inside. You turn back toward the door, ready to see the tools the servants use to make these beds even more comfortable before the lord and lady arrive. You move quietly, not wanting to wake the sleepers, as you head back into the shadows of the hallway. You step back into the hallway, leaving the quiet bedchamber behind. But your mind is still on that massive bed. You wonder how it ever gets warm enough to sleep in. The answer is found in the hands of a young servant girl walking toward you. She is carrying a strange object. It looks like a large, round frying pan made of shiny orange copper. It has a very long wooden handle and a heavy lid with small holes punched into it in the shape of a flower. This is a bedwagon, or as most people call it, a warming pan. The servant stops at a small brazier in the hallway to fill her pan. She uses a pair of iron tongs to pick up glowing red coals. She places them carefully inside the copper pan and snaps the lid shut. You can hear the coals clinking against the metal. The copper starts to glow and change color as it gets hot. The smell of burning charcoal fills the air. It is a dry, dusty smell. She holds the pan by the long handle so she does not burn her fingers. She is heading for the next bedchamber to perform a very important part of the night shift. You follow her into the room. She walks straight to the big canopy bed. She pulls back the heavy red curtains just a few inches. The air inside the bed is still cold from the day. She slides the long-handled pan between the linen sheets. She does not leave it in one place. If she did, the heat would scorch the fabric or even start a fire. Instead, she moves the pan back and forth, up and down, in long, smooth strokes. She is ironing the bed with heat. Here is a simple fact about these tools. Before the invention of heaters or rubber hot water bottles, the warming pan was the only way to take the sting out of a cold bed. In the winter, the linen sheets would feel like they were made of ice. Climbing into a cold bed could give a person a shiver fit, which made it very hard to fall asleep. By using the warming pan for 10 minutes, the servant can raise the temperature of the bedding until it feels as warm as a fresh loaf of bread. You watch as she works. The copper pan makes a soft hiss as it moves over the sheets. You can see a little bit of steam rising from the bed. This is the moisture in the linen being turned into vapor by the heat. The air inside the curtains starts to smell like warm laundry. It is a very comforting smell. The servant is very careful. She uses her free hand to feel the sheets every few seconds, making sure they are just right. Not too hot, but definitely not cold. Now, take a long moment for silence. The only sound in the room is the rhythmic slide of the metal pan against the fabric. It is a very hypnotic sound. You can see the orange glow from the coals through the little holes in the lid. It looks like a tiny lantern moving under the covers. The darkness of the room feels softer now. You realize that this simple act of moving a pan is what makes the difference between a miserable night and a restful one. The servant finishes her work and pulls the pan out. She closes the curtains tightly to trap the heat inside. The bed is now a warm pocket of air, waiting for its owner. She moves to the fireplace and empties the dying coals into the ash. Her job here is done. She gives you a quick, tired smile before she disappears back into the hallway. She has many more beds to warm before her shift ends. You notice a small object sitting on the bedside rug. It is a foot warmer. It is a small wooden box with a metal grate on top and a handle. Inside the box is a small pottery bowl. the servant would fill that bowl with hot embers and place the box under a person's feet while they sat in a chair. It is like a tiny, portable hearth just for your toes. You reach down and touch the wood. It is smooth and warm. In a castle made of stone, these little islands of heat are the things people value the most. You think about the cleverness of these tools. They are all about moving heat from the big fire in the hall to the small spaces where people live. The warming pan is a bridge between the giant oak logs and the delicate linen sheets. It shows you that medieval people didn't just sit and shiver. They used their brains to find ways to carry the warmth. They turned heavy metals like copper and iron into tools for comfort. You look at the bed again. Because the curtains are shut, you can't see the warmth, but you can feel it. If you were to put your hand near the fabric, you would feel a gentle radiation. It is the same feeling you get when you stand near a brick wall that has been in the sun all day. The bed has become a heat battery. It has soaked up the energy from the coals and will hold onto it for a few hours, long enough for a person to fall into a deep sleep. There is another tool in the corner of the room. It is a large wooden frame that looks like a small tent. This is called a bed wagon. Sometimes, if the blankets were very heavy, a servant would put the warming pan inside this wooden frame and then put the frame under the covers. This held the blankets up and let the hot air move all around the bed like a little oven. It was a very fancy way to get the bed ready. It shows you that for the wealthy, the night shift was all about details. You walk back toward the door. The smell of the warm linen follows you. You feel a bit jealous of the person who will get to sleep in that bed, but you also feel a new respect for the servants. They spend their whole night carrying heavy pans of fire up and down cold stairs. Their arms must ache by morning. They are the ones who chase the frost out of the blankets. They are the heat bearers of the castle. As you step back into the hallway, the air feels even colder than before, because you have just been near such a warm place. You pull your cloak tighter. You are moving on to see what the people themselves wear to bed. You want to see the layers of wool and linen that act as a second wall against the winter. You head down the corridor, following the flicker of a distant torch, ready to see how the people of the castle dress for the long, dark watch. You turn away from the glowing bed and look at the clothes laid out on the wooden chest. In the modern world, we think of bedtime as a time to take clothes off. We put on thin pajamas or nightshirts and jump under a duvet. But in the middle of a medieval winter, taking off your clothes would be a very bad idea. The air in this room is like a wall of ice. If you stood here with no clothes on, the cold would sap your energy in minutes. To survive the night shift of sleep, you have to dress like you were going for a long walk in the woods. You pick up the first layer. This is your undershirt. For a man, it is called a shirt. For a woman, it is called a smock or a chemise. It is made of linen. Linen is a very special fabric made from the stalks of the flax plant. It is white and very smooth. When you pull it over your head, it feels a bit stiff and cold against your skin. But linen is very clever. It is strong, and it is very good at soaking up the moisture from your body. In the winter, if you get a little bit sweaty under all your blankets, you do not want that wetness to stay on your skin. If your skin stays wet, you will get cold very fast. The linen shirt pulls the dampness away, keeping you dry and safe. Here is a simple fact about medieval life. Most people only owned a few sets of clothes, but they almost always had more than one linen shirt. This is because the linen shirt was the only thing that touched your skin. It kept the oils and sweat of your body away from your expensive wool tunics. It was easy to wash in a big tub of hot water and soap, while wool was very hard to clean. So, the linen shirt was like a shield for your body and your other clothes. Now, you reach for the next layer. This is a tunic made of thick, heavy wool. It is dyed a deep brown color. The wool is scratchy and rough to the touch. It smells a bit like a wet sheep and a bit like wood smoke. You pull it on over the linen shirt. Immediately, you feel the weight of it. It is heavy on your shoulders. Wool is the king of fabrics in the castle. Each little hair of the wool has a tiny curl in it. These curls trap little pockets of air. Your body warms up that air, and the wool holds onto it. It is like you are carrying your own little heater around with you. Even if the wool gets a bit damp from the misty air in the room, it will still keep you warm. You look down at your legs. You are wearing hose. These are not like modern socks. They are long tubes made of wool that go all the way from your feet to your hips. They are held up by little linen strings tied to your belt. You also put on a pair of thick woolen socks. They are lumpy and have big seams, but they are very thick. Your feet are the furthest part of your body from your heart, so they are the first things to get cold. Keeping your feet warm is the most important rule of the winter night. Next, you pick up a small white cap. This is called a coif. It is a simple linen cap that ties under your chin. You might think it looks a bit funny, but it is very practical. You also have a thicker woolen cap to go over it. This is your nightcap. We lose a lot of our body heat through the top of our heads. If you leave your head uncovered in a freezing room, you will wake up with a headache or a cold. The nightcap keeps your brain warm while you dream. It feels snug and cozy, like a warm hug for your ears. Take a moment for silence. You are standing in the middle of the room, fully dressed for bed. Listen to the sound of your own movements. The linen rustles softly. The wool makes a thick, muffled sound. There is no sound of zippers or buttons. Everything is held together with ties and knots. It is a very quiet way to dress. You can feel the heat of your body starting to build up under all those layers. You are becoming a little island of warmth in the big dark room. You sit on the edge of the mattress to pull on your last layer of the night. This is a bedgown. It is like a very thick robe made of wool and lined with rabbit fur. The fur feels incredibly soft against your hands. It is much warmer than the wool alone. Rabbit fur is very common in the castle because there are many rabbits in the fields outside. It is a micro-history detail that tells us a lot about daily life. While the lord might have fur from a lynx or a sable, the people working the night shift or living in the middle rooms use what they can find. This fur-lined gown is your final wall of defense. You think about the night shift workers who made these clothes, the women who spent all day spinning the wool into thread, the weavers who sat at big wooden looms, throwing the shuttle back and forth to make the cloth, the tailors who cut the fabric with big iron shears and sewed every stitch by hand. Every thread in your clothes was touched by a human hand. There are no machines here to make things fast. Each layer you are wearing represents weeks of hard work. It makes you value the warmth even more. The weight of all these clothes is surprising. You are wearing 3 or 4 layers, and they probably weigh as much as a small dog. This weight is actually very comforting. It feels like you are being tucked in, even before you get under the blankets. In the medieval world, they didn't have weighted blankets like we do now, but their clothes served the same purpose. The pressure of the heavy wool helps your body relax. It tells your brain that it is time to stop worrying about the cold and start thinking about sleep. You notice that you are not wearing any jewelry or belts now. You have taken off your leather boots and replaced them with soft wool slippers. You are ready. You look at the bed with its red curtains. Inside, the warming pan has done its work. The sheets are toasty. You have your linen for dryness, your wool for heat, your fur for softness, and your cap for protection. You are a masterpiece of medieval engineering. You stand up and walk toward the bed. Your layers move with you. You don't feel the drafts of wind hitting the tower walls as much now. You feel solid. You feel like you could survive a night in the middle of a snowstorm if you had to. You reach out and pull back the curtain. The warm air from inside the bed hits your face. It smells like the beeswax and herbs we noticed before. You climb into the bed. The straw in the mattress rustles under your weight. The linen sheets feel wonderful against your linen shirt. You pull the heavy wool blankets up to your chin. Then you pull the fur coverlet over everything. Finally, you reach out and pull the red wool curtains shut. Now, the darkness is complete. You are in your own tiny, warm world. You can hear your own heart beating. You can feel the heat from your body filling the small space. You are no longer a person in a cold castle. You are a warm seed tucked deep in the earth, waiting for the spring. You close your eyes, feeling the layers of history and fabric keeping you safe from the winter night. You step out of the warm bed and move quietly to the door of the chamber. You pull your fur-lined gown tight as you step back into the long, dark corridor. The castle is different now. It is the middle of the night, the time when the night shift workers are not moving but resting. You want to see where the people go who do not have grand beds with red curtains. You want to see the servants in the shadows. As you walk down the stone stairs, you have to be very quiet. The stone is cold, but you are wearing your thick wool slippers. You reach the great hall again. The big fire has burned down to a pile of glowing red eyes. The Fire Warden is still there, sitting on his stool. But he is not whittling now. He is leaning back against the stone wall with his eyes closed. But he is not the only one in the hall. You look at the floor near the walls. In the dim light, you see shapes. They look like lumpy sacks of grain at first, but then you hear a soft snore. These are the servants. Here is a simple historical fact. In a medieval castle, most of the workers did not have their own bedrooms. Only the high officers and the noble family had private spaces. For the cooks, the cleaners, and the messengers, the great hall was their bedroom. When the tables were pushed back and the lord went upstairs, the servants took over the floor. You move closer to one of the shapes. It is a young girl, perhaps the one who warmed the bed earlier. She's sleeping on a pallet. This is a special tool for sleep. A pallet is a simple mattress made of a large sack of rough linen stuffed with dried straw or hay. It is not very thick. When you lie on it, you can still feel the hard stone floor underneath. It is lumpy and it makes a loud rustling sound every time you move. You reach down and touch the straw sticking out of a small hole in the linen. It feels sharp and dry. The girl is not wearing a nightgown. She is wearing her work tunic. She has pulled her legs up to her chest to stay warm. Over her body, she has a heavy cloak made of dark grey wool. This is her livery cloak. In the castle, the lord would give his servants a set of clothes each year. This was called livery. The wool is very cheap and very rough. It is not soft like the wool in the lord's bed. It has bits of grass and dirt stuck in the threads, but it is thick. It is the only thing between her and the freezing air of the hall. Now take a long moment for silence. Stand in the middle of the great hall and listen. You can hear the breath of 20 people sleeping in the shadows. It is a soft, hushing sound, like the waves of the sea hitting the sand. Hush, hush, hush. You can hear the straw of the pallets rustling. You can hear the straw of the pallets rustling. You can hear a dog twitching in its sleep near the hearth. The hall feels very full, even though it is empty of life and noise. It is a community of sleepers all huddling near the dying heat of the hearth. You walk toward the kitchens. The air here is a little bit warmer because the big stone ovens hold onto their heat for a long time. You see a boy sleeping on a wooden bench right next to the oven wall. He has no pallet. He is just using his folded arms as a pillow. His face is dusty with flour. He is the pastry boy, and he will have to wake up in just a few hours to start the morning bread. He is sleeping so deeply that he does not even hear your slippers on the floor. You notice that many of the servants sleep in pairs or small groups. They lie back to back or side to side. This is another way to fight the winter. Human bodies are like small fires. If you put them together, the heat stays longer. This was a very common way to sleep in the medieval world. It was not about being crowded. It was about staying alive. If you sat alone on the stone floor, the cold would soak into your back and you might wake up with a fever. But if you shared your warmth with a friend, you both stood a better chance of seeing the sun. You see a small object sitting on the floor next to an old man sleeping near the door. It is a rushing candle holder. This is a simple iron stand with a little clip. A rushing candle is not made of expensive beeswax. It is made by taking a long piece of a plant called a rush, peeling back the skin, and dipping the soft middle part into melted animal fat. It burns very fast and smells like cooked meat. The old man probably used it to find his way to his spot on the floor before blowing it out. The smell of the fat still hangs in the air around him. It is a heavy, greasy smell that mixes with the smell of the damp straw. The shadows in the hall are very long. The pillars that hold up the roof look like giant trees in a dark forest. You realize that the castle at night is a map of who is important. The lord is at the top in his warm cocoon. The servants are at the bottom on the floor. But there is a strange kind of peace here. In the dark, everyone is doing the same thing. Everyone is trying to find a bit of rest before the hard work of the morning starts. You look at the walls. High up, you can see the faint grey light of the moon coming through the louver in the roof. A few snowflakes drift down through the hole and land on the rushes. They melt instantly, but they remind you that the winter is still out there, pressing against the stone. The servants in the shadows have learned to ignore the cold. They have learned to make a home on a hard floor with a bit of straw and a rough cloak. They are the tough, silent heart of the castle. You feel a bit like a ghost, walking among all these sleeping people. You see their shoes lined up near their pallets. They are simple shoes made of brown leather, worn thin at the heels. You see a small wooden bowl near one man, perhaps holding the remains of his supper. These are the tiny treasures of the night shift: a soft spot on the floor, a heavy cloak, and a bit of warmth from a neighbour. You walk back toward the stairs. You are careful not to trip over a sleeping guard or a pile of firewood. The castle is a place of stone and iron, but tonight it feels like a place of breath and straw. You have seen the hierarchy of warmth, and you have seen how the people at the bottom make do with what they have. You take one last look at the girl on her straw pallet. She looks very small in the big dark hall, but she is sleeping, and for now, that is enough. You turn and head back toward the upper floors, moving quietly through the shadows, ready to see what other secrets the night holds for those who share their beds with the animals. You return to your bedchamber, but as you approach the large canopy bed, you notice a weight at the foot of it. You pull back the heavy red curtain and see a pair of amber eyes glowing in the dark. It is one of the castle's hunting hounds, a large dog with thick, wiry fur, the color of slate. He has found a way into your room and has claimed a spot on top of your fur coverlet. He does not growl, he simply sighs, a long, heavy sound of contentment, and thumps his tail once against the mattress. In the medieval world, sharing your bed with an animal was not just about being kind to a pet. It was a very practical way to survive. A large dog is like a living, breathing furnace. While a warming pan full of coals will eventually grow cold, a dog stays warm all night long. His body is always burning energy and making heat. By letting him sleep at your feet, you are adding a powerful heater to your bed. This is why medieval people often had many dogs in their chambers. They were part of the night shift too. Here is a simple historical fact. Many people believe the phrase "a three-dog night" comes from this time. It means a night that is so freezing and bitter that you need 3 dogs in your bed just to keep from shivering. In a castle where the stone walls soak up the frost, a pack of hounds was as valuable as a pile of firewood. Dogs were the original electric blankets. They were loyal, they kept you safe, and most importantly, they kept you toasty. You climb back into the bed, being careful not to push the dog off. He is heavy, and his body creates a deep, warm dip in the blankets. You tuck your feet right up against his side. Through the layers of wool and linen, you can feel his heat soaking into your toes. It is a deep, steady warmth. The dog has a special smell. It is earthy, like dried mud and old fur. It is a very natural smell that reminds you of the forest. To a person in the medieval night, this smell meant comfort. It meant you were not alone in the cold. Now, take a moment for silence. Close your eyes and feel the rhythm of the dog's breathing. Ho, 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 ho. It is slower than your own breath. Every now and then, his paws twitch as he dreams of chasing a stag through the summer woods. You can feel his heartbeat against your ankles. It is a steady, reassuring thrum. The room is silent, the wind is muffled by the curtains, and the only life is the heat shared between you and the hound. It is a very ancient kind of peace. You notice a small object on the floor near the dog's head. It is a flea trap. This is a microhistory detail that tells us about the troubles of the night. Because humans and animals lived so close together, bugs were a big problem. The trap is a small hollow tube made of bone or ivory with tiny holes carved into it. Inside the tube is a piece of cloth soaked in honey and animal fat. The fleas are attracted to the smell and the stickiness, so they hop inside the tube and get stuck. It is a simple tool, but it helps keep the bed a bit more comfortable for both you and your furry heater. The dog's fur is very thick. This is a special type of coat called a double coat. Underneath the long, scratchy hairs you can feel, there is a layer of soft, fuzzy down. This down traps the dog's body heat and keeps it from escaping. When the dog lies on your bed, that heat moves out into your blankets. You realize that nature has provided the dog with the same layering system you are wearing. His skin is like your linen shirt, his down is like your wool tunic, and his long outer hair is like your fur-lined gown. You think about the other animals in the castle. In the stables below, the horses are huddling together in their stalls. The stable boys often sleep right in the straw next to the horses. A horse is even bigger and warmer than a dog. By sleeping in the stable, a poor boy can stay much warmer than a servant sleeping on the stone floor of the great hall. The animals and humans work together to fight the winter. The horses get a dry place to stay, and the boys get a giant warm body to lean against. You reach out and pat the dog's flank. His fur feels a bit dusty. In the medieval world, dogs were not washed with soap and water like they are today. They lived in the dirt and the rushes. But on a night like this, you do not care about the dust. You only care about the heat. You pull the fur coverlet up over both of you. The dog settles deeper into the mattress, resting his heavy head on your feet. The weight is comforting. It feels like you are being anchored to the bed, safe from the drafts that sneak through the room. There is a feeling of companionship in the dark. In the modern world, we have heaters that do not breathe or move. But here, the heat is alive. It has a heart and a voice. If the fire in the heart dies completely, the dog will still be warm. He is a reliable source of life in a world that feels very cold and dead during the winter months. You feel a deep gratitude for this hound. He doesn't ask for gold or silk. He only asks for a corner of your bed and a bit of meat in the morning. You realize that the night shift at the castle includes everyone: the Fire Warden, the guards, the servants, and even the dogs. Each one has a role to play in keeping the castle going until the sun comes up. The dog's role is to be a guardian and a heater. He watches the door with his sharp ears even while he sleeps, and he keeps the frost away from your feet. It is a fair trade. The warmth of the dog starts to make you feel very heavy and drowsy. Your feet are no longer cold, they feel almost hot. The shivers you felt in the hallway are gone. You pull the red curtains tight, making sure there is no gap. The dog's breathing becomes a soft hum in the background of your thoughts. You are drifting now, sinking into the soft straw and the wool and the living heat of the hound. You feel safe, you're part of the pack, and the pack stays warm together. You close your eyes, letting the steady thrum of the dog's heart lead you into a deep, dreamless sleep. You wake from a short, warm nap and find that the room is still very dark. The dog is still asleep at your feet, but you feel a bit thirsty. You decide to slip out of the bed and head down toward the kitchens. As you move through the castle, you notice that the temperature changes as you get closer to the cooking area. While the rest of the castle is like a tomb, the kitchen is like a busy hive. Here, the night shift is working very hard to get ready for the morning. As you step into the kitchen, you are hit by a wave of heat. It is not the dry, sharp heat of the great hall fire. This is a wet, thick heat. The air is full of steam and the smell of roasting meat and baking bread. The stone walls here are not sweating cold water. They are warm to the touch. The kitchen is the only part of the castle that stays truly hot all night long. This is because the ovens are made of massive stones and bricks that hold the heat like a giant battery. You see the head cook standing by a large wooden table. He is a big man with a white apron tied around his waist. He is not sleeping. He is directing a small army of boys. Some are peeling large baskets of onions, while others are scrubbing iron pots that are big enough for a child to sit in. In the corner, the big bread oven is glowing. It is a large, rounded structure built into the wall. A fire was lit inside it hours ago to get the stones hot. Now, the fire has been scraped out, and the oven is ready to bake. Here is a simple historical fact. Medieval kitchens were often kept in separate buildings or far away from the lord's living rooms. This was because they were very noisy, they smelled very strong, and they were the most likely place for a fire to start. But in the winter, the kitchen was the most popular place in the castle. Everyone wanted a reason to visit the hot room. The kitchen staff were often the healthiest people in the building because they never had to worry about the frostbite that plagued the guards on the walls. You watch as a kitchen boy picks up a special tool. It is called a peel. It looks like a very long wooden paddle with a flat, round end. He uses it to slide large rounds of dough deep into the back of the oven. The stones are so hot that the bread starts to rise and turn brown in minutes. The boy's face is red and covered in sweat. He uses the peel to move the loaves around so they do not burn. It is a micro-history detail that tells us how people worked. They didn't have timers or dials. They had to feel the heat with their skin and watch the color of the crust. Now, take a long moment for silence. Stand near the oven and listen. You can hear the soft crackle-pop of the small fires under the soup pots. You can hear the thud-thud of the boy kneading dough on the wooden table. You can hear the steam hissing as it escapes from a heavy iron lid. It is a very busy, productive sound. Unlike the lonely silence of the tower stairs, the kitchen sounds like life. It feels like the castle is already waking up, even though the sun is still far away. The cook sees you and hands you a small wooden cup. It is filled with warm milk that has been sweetened with a bit of honey. It feels wonderful in your cold hands. You take a sip, and the warmth travels all the way down to your stomach. You notice a large fireplace in the center of the kitchen. Above the fire, several large pieces of meat are turning on metal rods called spits. These spits are being turned by a turnspit boy. This is one of the hardest jobs on the night shift. He has to sit on a low stool and turn the handle for hours so the meat cooks evenly. If he stops, the meat will burn on one side and stay raw on the other. You notice a small, funny-looking dog sitting near the turnspit boy. This is a special breed of dog called a turnspit dog. In some castles, these dogs were put inside a wooden wheel that was connected to the spit. As the dog ran, the wheel turned and the meat cooked. It was a living machine. Tonight the dog is resting on a pile of warm ash, watching the meat with hungry eyes. He is part of the kitchen family, and he gets the best scraps as a reward for his hard work. The kitchen is full of interesting smells. There is the sharp scent of vinegar, the earthy smell of root vegetables like turnips and parsnips, and the spicy smell of peppercorns being crushed in a stone bowl. These smells are heavy and rich. They make the air feel thicker, almost like you could eat it. It is a great contrast to the thin, cold air of the corridors. You feel your energy coming back. The heat of the kitchen is like a fuel that restarts your own internal fire. You see a servant filling a tray with small pottery jars. These are posset cups. A posset is a hot drink made of curdled milk, ale, and spices. It was the medieval version of a nightcap. The servant will take these jars to the guards and the officers who are still awake. It is a way to give them a little bit of the kitchen's warmth to carry with them back into the cold. The jars are wrapped in thick cloth to keep the heat inside while the servant walks through the drafty hallways. You look at the floor. It is covered in a fresh layer of sawdust. This helps to soak up any grease or water that spills during the busy night. It also provides a bit of insulation against the stone floor. The kitchen staff wear thick wooden clogs instead of leather slippers. This keeps their feet high off the wet floor and protects them from any hot coals that might pop out of the fire. You can hear the clack-clack of their clogs on the stone. The head cook begins to bark orders, and the boys move even faster. The morning meal, called breaking fast, must be ready by the time the first light hits the chapel windows. The kitchen never stops. It is a 24-hour operation. When the day's shift finishes the big dinner, the night shift begins the baking and the cleaning. It is the engine that keeps the castle alive. Without the kitchen, the castle would be a cold, hungry place. You finish your milk and hand the cup back to the cook. He gives you a nod and goes back to his work. You feel toasty and full. The kitchen has given you a boost of heat that will last for a long time. You take one last look at the glowing oven and the busy boys before you head back toward the great hall. You are moving away from the noise and the steam, but you carry the smell of fresh bread and the warmth of the fire with you. The night shift continues, and you are ready to see what these people eat to keep their bodies burning through the winter frost. You find a quiet corner of the kitchen where a long wooden table sits near a smaller hearth. On the table is a heavy bowl made of thick grey clay. Steam rises from it in a thick white cloud that smells of onions, dried peas, and salty bacon. This is pottage. If you lived in a medieval castle, you would eat this dish almost every single day, especially in the winter. It is not a fancy meal, but it is the most important fuel for the night shift. In the cold, your body is like a small stove. To keep your inner fire burning, you need to give it plenty of wood. Pottage is that wood. You pick up a spoon sitting next to the bowl. This is a treen spoon. Treen is an old word from made of tree or wooden. Most people in the castle, from the lowest kitchen boy to the guards on the walls, use wooden spoons and bowls. Wood is better than metal in the winter because it does not get freezing cold to the touch. It feels warm and smooth in your hand. You can see the grain of the wood in the bowl of the spoon, worn down by many meals. Here is a simple historical fact. For most people in the Middle Ages, grain was the most important part of their life. About 80% of what they ate came from grains like oats, rye, or barley. They didn't have potatoes or pasta like we do now. Instead, they boiled these grains in a big pot with whatever else they could find. This created a thick, heavy soup that stayed in your stomach for a long time. It gave you the energy to stand in the cold for hours without feeling weak. You take a spoonful of the pottage. It is very hot and very thick. It is not like the thin soups we have today. It is almost like a soft bread you eat with a spoon. You can taste the saltiness of the preserved meat. Because there are no fridges, meat is kept in big barrels of salt or hung in the chimney to be smoked. This makes the meat very tough and salty, but it lasts all winter. You also taste leeks and cabbage, which were some of the few vegetables that could be stored in a cool cellar without rotting. Now, take a long moment for silence. Look at the steam rising from your bowl. In the dim light of the kitchen, the steam looks like a ghost dancing above the table. You can hear the heavy breathing of the kitchen boys as they work. You can hear the distant muffled sound of the wind outside. Everything feels slow and heavy. The warmth from the bowl travels into your hands, and as you swallow, you can feel the heat moving down into your chest. It is a very simple, honest feeling of being full and safe. You notice a large loaf of bread sitting in the middle of the table. This is maslin bread. It is made from a mix of wheat and rye flour. It is very dark, almost the color of the earth, and the crust is as hard as a rock. You have to use a sharp knife to saw off a piece. When you dip the bread into the pottage, the hard crust soaks up the liquid and becomes soft. This bread is the plate for many people. Sometimes they didn't even use bowls. They would cut a thick slice of stale bread, called a trencher, and pour the thick pottage right on top of it. By the time you finished the soup, the bread was soft and full of flavor, and you would eat your plate, too. The food on the night shift is all about being hot and dry in the mind of a medieval doctor. They believed that winter was a cold and wet season, so to stay healthy, you had to eat things that were the opposite. This is why they loved to use onions, garlic, and leeks. They believed these foods warmed up your blood. You can feel it working. Your cheeks are starting to feel a bit pink, and the tips of your ears don't feel quite so cold anymore. You see a bowl of small wrinkled fruits on the table. These are medlars. They're a very strange fruit that only becomes sweet after it has started to get a bit soft and rotting in the cold. People called it bletting. In the middle of winter, when there is no fresh fruit, these little brown medlars are like a treat of honey and apple. They are full of sugar, which gives the workers a quick burst of energy to keep moving through the dark hours. The pottage pot in the kitchen is never truly empty. They call it the perpetual pottage. As the workers eat from it, the cook adds more water, more grain, and more vegetables. It simmers over the fire for days and days. The heat from the fire makes the grains burst and turn into a thick cream. It is a very efficient way to cook. It uses very little wood to keep one big pot hot, and there is always something warm ready for a guard coming off the walls or a messenger arriving in the middle of the night. You finish your bowl and feel a deep sense of heavy comfort. Your stomach feels full and warm. This is the inner hearth that helps people survive the castle. You can have the thickest walls and the best blankets, but if you are hungry, the cold will find a way in. The pottage is like an extra layer of wool worn on the inside. It makes you feel solid and strong. You look at the wooden spoon one last time. It is a humble tool, but it is a friend to every mouth in the castle. It carries the fuel that keeps the human machine running. You leave the spoon in the empty bowl and stand up. You feel much better now. Your legs feel stronger and your mind feels more awake. The night shift is only half over, but you are ready to continue. You walk toward a small side door where the servant earlier was carrying the posset cups. You want to see what else they drink to keep the frost away. You have had your solid fuel, and now you are looking for liquid heat. The kitchen is still humming behind you, a warm factory of food, as you step back into the cooler air of the transition hallway, feeling the weight of the pottage keeping you steady and warm. You follow the servant with a tray of cups into a smaller room tucked away near the wine cellar. This is the buttery. It is a cool, quiet place where the drinks of the castle are kept in large wooden barrels called tuns. But tonight it is not cool. On a small brick stove in the corner, a large copper pot is simmering. The air here is sweet and heavy. It smells of cinnamon, cloves, and ginger. This is the scent of spiced wine, often called hypacras. It is the liquid version of the great hall fire. The servant is using a long metal ladle to fill the pottery cups. The wine is a deep, dark red, and it glows like a ruby in the candlelight. As the hot liquid hits the cool cups, a fresh cloud of spicy steam rises up. This is a very special drink. In the medieval world, wine was often safer to drink than water, which could be dirty and make you sick. But cold wine was not very good for you in the winter. People believed that cold drinks would put out your internal fire. So, they heated the wine and added spices to make it a powerful medicine against the frost. Here is a simple historical fact. Spices like cinnamon and black pepper were incredibly expensive. They had to travel thousands of miles on the backs of camels and in small sailing ships to reach the castle. Because they were so dear, they were kept in a locked chest. Using them in wine was a sign that the lord was very wealthy. But it was also seen as a way to keep his most important guards and officers healthy. The heat of the wine helped the blood move, and the spices were thought to dry out the damp cold of the night. You take one of the cups from the tray. It is made of thick clay, and it feels wonderful against your palms. The heat from the wine moves through the pottery and warms your fingers. You bring the cup to your nose and breathe in the steam. The spices are so strong that they make your nose tingle. You take a small sip. It is very sweet, flavored with honey, but it also has a sharp bite from the ginger and pepper. It feels like a small, warm sun is sliding down your throat and spreading out into your chest. Now, take a long moment for silence. The buttery is very still. You can hear the slow drip of a barrel and the soft hiss of the wine in the copper pot. You can feel the warmth from the cup moving up your arms. The world feels very calm and centered. For a few minutes, you don't think about the snow outside or the cold stone walls. You just focus on the heat in your hands and the taste of the spices on your tongue. It is a moment of pure, liquid comfort. You notice a small bundle of sticks on the table. These are cinnamon sticks, but they look like pieces of dried bark from a tree. Next to them is a small leather bag filled with whole cloves, which look like tiny black nails. This is a micro-history detail of the kitchen night shift. To get the flavor into the wine, the cook doesn't just throw the spices in. He puts them inside a linen bag called manipul and lets them soak in the hot wine. This keeps the wine clear, so you don't get a mouthful of bark or seeds when you drink. The drink gives you a different kind of warmth than the pottage did. The pottage was heavy and made you feel solid. The spiced wine is light and makes your skin feel tingly. You can feel the tips of your fingers and toes starting to wake up. This is why the guards love this drink. Standing on top of a windy wall for 4 hours is very hard. Your body starts to shut down to save heat. A cup of this liquid fire can restart your system and give you the strength to finish your watch. You see a different barrel in the corner, marked with a simple cross. This holds the small ale. This is a lighter drink that everyone in the castle, even the children, drinks throughout the day. In the winter, they often mull the ale too. They take a red-hot iron poker from the fire and plunge it straight into a mug of cold ale. The liquid hisses and foams up, turning warm and creamy in an instant. It is a quick and easy way for a servant to get a warm drink without waiting for a pot to boil. The servant picks up his tray and prepares to head out. He has a long walk ahead of him. He will go up to the battlements where the guards are standing in the snow. He will go to the gatehouse where the porter is watching the heavy iron bars. He is like a travelling heater, bringing a few minutes of joy to the coldest parts of the castle. He wraps a thick wool cloth over the top of the cups to keep the steam from escaping into the chilly hallway. You watch him go and realize that the castle has many ways to fight the winter. There is the big fire for the body, the heavy wool for the skin, the thick pottage for the stomach, and the spiced wine for the blood. Each one is like a different layer of armor. The people of the night shift have learned that they cannot just rely on one thing. They have to attack the cold from every side. They use every tool and every spice they have to keep the darkness at bay. You finish your wine and set the cup down. The honey has left a sweet taste in your mouth, and the pepper has left a lingering glow in your throat. You feel ready to face the coldest part of the castle now. You have been in the warm rooms and the busy kitchens. But now, you want to see the people who are standing right in the middle of the winter. You want to see the guards on the walls. You head toward the door that leads back to the spiral stairs. The air in the buttery was sweet and warm, but as you step out, you feel the first touch of the outer chill again. However, the spiced wine is still working inside you. You feel a new sense of energy. You are moving away from the liquid heat and toward the wind and the stars. You are ready to climb high once more and see the silent watchmen who guard the sleeping fortress. The heat from the spiced wine is a warm glow inside you as you push open the heavy door at the top of the stairs. This door leads outside onto the high walk of the castle walls. The transition is shocking. The wind hits you like a solid wall of ice. It is a wild, screaming wind that has travelled across miles of frozen forests and empty fields just to howl against these stones. The air is filled with tiny, sharp crystals of snow that sting your eyes. For a moment, you want to turn back to the buttery and the fire. But then you see a figure standing in the shadows of a stone tower. This is a guard on the night watch. He is standing perfectly still, looking out over the dark world. He is so covered in frost that he almost looks like a statue made of ice. He is wearing a heavy cloak of dark wool, but he has tied it tight with a leather belt to stop the wind from blowing it open. On his head is a steel cap, a simple helmet called a kettle hat because it looks like an upside-down pot. Under the helmet, he wears a thick wool hood that covers his ears and neck. Only his eyes are visible, peering out into the black night. Here is a simple historical fact about the night watch. These men did not stand here all night. They worked in watches, which were shifts that lasted about 4 hours. Standing still in the freezing cold is very dangerous. If you stay still for too long, your blood slows down and your body starts to go to sleep. To stay awake and warm, The guards would walk back and forth along their section of the wall. They would stomp their feet to keep the feeling in their toes and swing their arms to keep the blood moving to their fingers. You walk toward him, your boots crunching on a thin layer of frozen snow. The guard turns his head slowly. He is holding a long spear, and the wooden handle is wrapped in strips of cloth. This is a micro-history detail that saves his life tonight. Bare wood or cold metal can stick to your skin in this kind of freezing weather. By wrapping the handle in cloth, he can hold his weapon without the cold biting through his gloves. He gives you a small nod. He cannot speak easily because his breath has turned to ice on his woolen muffler. Now, take a long moment for silence. Stand next to the guard and look out over the battlements. You cannot see the ground. Everything below is a sea of grey and black. You can only hear the wind. It makes a deep, booming sound as it hits the towers, and a high, thin whistle as it moves through the narrow arrow slits. The stars above are very bright and very cold. They look like chips of ice scattered on a black floor. You feel very small and very high up. The castle feels like a lonely island in a frozen ocean. The guard reaches into a small stone niche in the wall. He pulls out a small pottery jar, the same kind you saw in the buttery. It is a posset cup, brought to him by the servant earlier. He holds it with both hands, using the last of its heat to warm his palms. The drink inside is no longer hot, but it is still thick and sweet. He takes a slow sip, and you see the steam rise from his mouth. For him, this cup is more than just a drink. It is a reminder that the world inside the walls is still warm and alive. You notice that he is standing on a wooden walkway. This is called a hoard. It is a wooden gallery built onto the top of the stone wall. It has a roof to keep the snow off the guards, but the sides are open so they can see the ground below. The wood is better to stand on than the stone because it does not steal the heat from your boots as fast. You can feel the boards creaking under your feet. Every few minutes, a heavy clump of snow falls from the roof and hits the walkway with a soft thump. The guard's job is very simple, but very hard. He has to watch for anything that moves in the dark. He looks for the orange glow of a campfire in the woods or the glint of a torch moving across the valley. But mostly, he watches the weather. If the snow gets too deep, he has to call for the night shift workers to come and clear the walkways. If the ice gets too thick, the stairs become too dangerous to climb. He is the eyes of the sleeping castle. He is the one who sees the winter coming before anyone else. You look at his gloves. They are thick mittens made of sheepskin with the wool left on the inside. They are lumpy and large, making his hands look like paws. Mittens are much warmer than gloves with fingers, because your fingers can huddle together for warmth, just like the servants in the hall. He also has a small piece of fur tied around the bridge of his nose to protect his skin from the wind. He looks more like a forest creature than a soldier. There is a small bell hanging from a wooden beam nearby. If the guard sees trouble, he pulls a rope to ring the bell. The sound would wake the whole castle in seconds, but tonight the bell is silent. It is covered in a delicate layer of hoarfrost, making it look like it is made of silver. The only sounds are the wind and the guard's heavy, slow breathing. He is a master of patience. He has learned to turn his mind off and just endure the cold 1 minute at a time until his shift is over. You think about the bravery of these men. They aren't fighting an army tonight. They are fighting the air itself. The cold is a quiet enemy that never gets tired. It never stops trying to find a gap in their clothes or a weakness in their spirit. The guard shifts his weight and stomps his feet 3 times fast. Thud, 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 thud. The sound is muffled by the snow. He looks at you and points toward a distant light. It is a single, tiny spark from a charcoal burner's hut deep in the forest. It is a sign that they are not the only ones awake in the frozen world. The guard reaches the end of his walk and turns around. You follow him back toward the tower door. You have seen the bank to watch, and you feel a deep chill in your bones that even the spiced wine cannot fight any more. You want to go back inside, back to the stone hallways where the wind cannot reach you. The guard stays behind, turning back to the darkness. He has 2 more hours of his watch left. As you pull the heavy door shut, the screaming wind is cut off instantly. The silence of the tower feels heavy and warm by comparison. You are heading back down, away from the stars and the ice. You are moving toward the lower parts of the castle to see how the winter affects the very water the people drink. You feel a deep respect for the man on the wall, standing his watch in the snow so that everyone else can dream of summer. You climb down the spiral stairs, leaving the freezing wind of the battlements behind. The air inside the tower feels heavy and still, but as you reach the lower levels, you notice a new sound. It is a sharp, rhythmic clink clink. It sounds like a hammer hitting glass. You follow the noise toward a small courtyard tucked between the kitchen and the main keep. Here, the ground is a sheet of solid grey ice, and the air smells of frozen mud. You see a man hunched over the edge of a stone circle. This is the castle well, and the man is a servant whose task is one of the most difficult on the night shift. He is holding a heavy iron bar with a pointed end. Every few seconds, he drives the point down into the mouth of the well. The water inside is frozen into a thick plug of ice several inches deep. If he does not break this ice, the kitchen will have no water for the morning pottage, and the horses will have nothing to drink. He is an icebreaker. In a world without pipes or taps, water is a treasure that the winter tries to lock away. The man's breath comes in short, ragged puffs of white steam. His hands are wrapped in rough burlap sacks to protect them from the freezing metal of the bar. Here is a simple historical fact about castle water. Most castles were built over a deep well to make sure the people could survive if an enemy surrounded them. These wells could be over 100 feet deep, reaching down into the warm heart of the earth where the water does not freeze. But the top of the well is open to the night air. The cold Ritchie hole reaches down and turns the surface into a lid of ice. The servant has to keep this lid broken all night long. If he waits too long, the ice will become so thick that even his iron bar cannot get through. You watch as a large chunk of ice finally snaps away. It falls back into the dark hole of the well with a distant, hollow splash. The man reaches for a wooden bucket attached to a thick hemp rope. He lowers it into the dark. You can hear the wooden bucket bumping against the stone sides, thump, scrape, thump. When it hits the liquid water far below, it makes a friendly gulping sound. He begins to pull the rope back up, hand over hand. The wet rope is already starting to stiffen and turn white with frost in the cold air. Now take a long moment for silence. The man has stopped to rest his arms. The courtyard is perfectly quiet. You can hear the tiny tinkling sound of water dripping from the bucket back into the well. It sounds like little bells. The stars are reflected in the small puddles of ice on the ground, looking like trapped diamonds. You realize how much work goes into a single cup of water. In the modern world, water is easy. Here, water is a battle fought with iron and rope in the middle of the night. The servant pours the water into a large wooden tunner, big barrel on wheels. The water is clear and dark. Even though it is liquid, it is so cold that it makes your teeth ache just looking at it. He has to move quickly. If the water sits still in the barrel for too long, it will start to freeze again. He begins to push the heavy barrel toward the kitchen door. The wooden wheels creak and groan, and they leave two dark tracks in the white frost on the ground. You notice a small stone trough near the wall. This is where the castle dogs and the chickens drink. It is frozen completely solid. The ice is humped up in the middle, looking like a tiny mountain range. The servant takes a smaller hammer and taps the ice in the trough, breaking it into small, jagged pieces so the animals can get to the liquid underneath. He does it gently. He knows that every living thing in the castle is thirsty, and the ice is everyone's enemy. This is a micro-history detail of the night, the constant war against the freezing of the small things. The plumbing of a castle is very simple, but is very hard to manage in the winter. You look up at the walls and see long stone chutes sticking out. These are the drains from the sinks and the garderobes, the castle toilets. You can see long ice tails hanging from the ends of these chutes. The waste and water have frozen as they tried to fall, creating giant icicles that look like frozen waterfalls. Some of these icicles are as thick as a man's waist. They will stay there until the spring thaw, a silent record of how cold the winter has been. You think about the people who have to wash in this water. In the morning, a servant will take a basin of this ice-cold water up to the Lord's chamber. He will have to break a thin skin of ice on the top of the bowl before he can splash his face. There are no hot showers here. If you want warm water, you have to heat it in a cauldron over the kitchen fire, which takes a lot of wood and a lot of time. Most people on the night shift simply stay dirty. The dirt and the oils on their skin actually help to protect them from the biting wind. The icebreaker reaches the kitchen door and disappears inside. You stay in the courtyard for a moment longer. You look at the well. It is a deep, dark throat reaching down into the earth. It is a reminder that even in the middle of a frozen fortress, there is life and liquid hidden away. You just have to be strong enough to break the ice to find it. The stone walls of the courtyard feel like they are squeezing the heat out of you, and you realize your own cloak is starting to feel stiff with frost. You walk back toward the main building. You pass a small shed where the laundry is done. Inside, there are big wooden tubs, but they are empty tonight. No one does laundry in the dead of winter if they can help it. The wet clothes would never dry. They would just turn into sheets of ice on the line. People wear the same wool clothes for weeks, adding more layers as the temperature drops. The smell of the castle, the smoke, the wool, the animals, is the smell of people who have chosen warmth over cleanliness. The courtyard is a lonely place at night. It feels like the cold is more real out here because there are no tapestries or fires to hide it. You feel the ice under your boots and the dampness in your breath. You're ready to go back to the world of wood and fabric. You head toward a different door, one that leads to the more comfortable parts of the castle. You want to see the rooms where the Lord spends his private hours, away from the drafts and the icebreakers. You take one last look at the stars, feeling their cold light on your skin, before you slip back inside the heavy stone walls. You move away from the cold courtyard and climb a wide, wooden staircase. These stairs are different from the tight stone spirals of the towers. They are made of thick oak planks that do not steal the heat from your feet. You are heading to the solar. This is the Lord's private sitting room. In the medieval world, the word solar comes from a word that means alone or private. It is the place where the family goes to escape the noise of the great hall. As you push open the door, you feel a warmth that is much steadier and softer than the roaring fire downstairs. The solar is a beautiful room. The walls are not bare stone, and they are not just covered in tapestries. They are lined with wainscot. This is a type of wood paneling made from oak. The wood has been polished with beeswax until it shines like dark honey. Wood is a wonderful insulator. It feels warm to the touch, and it stops the cold from the stone walls from reaching the air in the room. There are large rugs on the floor made of thick wool, dyed in deep reds and blues. Walking here is silent and soft. In the wall, there is a large fireplace with a stone hood that reaches out like a giant hand. The fire here is smaller than the one in the Great Hall, but it is much more efficient. It burns clean, dry logs of applewood. This wood gives off a sweet, fruity smell that fills the room. Because the room is smaller and the ceiling is lower, the heat stays down where the people are. It is the most comfortable room in the whole castle. You feel your shoulders drop and your breathing slow down. This is what wealth buys in the winter. The luxury of a room where you can take off your heavy cloak. Here is a simple historical fact about the solar. It was often built on the upper floor so it could have larger windows. While the lower floors had narrow slits for defense, the solar has windows with real glass. Glass was incredibly expensive and very hard to make. It was not perfectly clear like the glass we have today. It was thick and had little ripples and bubbles in it. But it was a miracle of technology. It let the light of the moon and the stars inside while keeping the freezing wind outside. For the Lord, this glass is a clear shield against the winter. You notice a small, beautiful object sitting on a low table near the fire. It is a table carpet. It is a small woven cloth with intricate patterns of flowers and vines. In the medieval world, rugs were so expensive that people often put them on tables instead of the floor. It feels soft and velvety under your fingers. Next to it is a small silver bowl filled with tomfits. These are seeds, like anise or caraway, coated in many layers of sugar. They are a micro-history detail of noble life. Sugar was a rare treat, and eating a warm comfit by the fire was the perfect way to end a long, cold day. Now take a long moment for silence. Sit in one of the heavy oak chairs near the hearth. The chair has a high back to protect you from any tiny drafts. You can hear the soft, steady ticking of the fire. Snap, pop. You can see the moonlight hitting the rippled glass of the window, creating dancing patterns of silver on the wood-paneled walls. There are no servants here right now. There are no guards. It is just you and the warmth. It feels like the castle is 1,000 miles away, even though you are right in the heart of it. The furniture in the solar is made for comfort. There are cushions everywhere. These are leather or silk bags stuffed with soft feathers or down from geese. In a world of hard stone and stiff wood, a soft cushion is a great treasure. You lean back and feel the feathers shift under your weight. The lord and lady spend their night shift here, reading by candlelight or playing games like tables, which is an old version of backgammon. It is a place where the mind can rest because the body is not busy fighting the frost. You look at the candles in this room. They are not the greasy, stinking tallow candles made of animal fat that the servants use. These are made of beeswax. They burn with a steady golden flame and they smell like honey and summer flowers. They do not smoke or drip as much. The light they give off is clean and bright. In the solar, the darkness of the winter night is pushed back by the best light and the best heat the medieval world can provide. It is an island of summer in the middle of a frozen kingdom. There is a small door in the corner that leads to a secret staircase. This allowed the Lord to move from his private room to the great hall without being seen by everyone. Even in his comfort, he is always thinking about privacy and safety. But for now, the door is shut and bolted with a heavy iron bar. The solar is a fortress within a fortress. The thick wood panels, the glass windows, and the wall rugs all work together to create a space where the winter is just something you watch through a pane of glass, not something you feel on your skin. You notice a large embroidered screen standing near the door. This is a fire screen. It is a wooden frame with a piece of heavy fabric stretched across it. It is used to block the direct heat of the fire if it gets too hot, or to stop the drafts from the doorway from reaching the people sitting by the hearth. It is another clever tool for managing the air. In the solar, the night shift is not about hard labor. It is about the careful management of comfort. Everything is designed to keep the environment perfectly balanced. You think about the contrast between this room and the courtyard you just left. Only a few feet of stone and wood separate the icebreaker from the Lord's cushioned chair. It feels unfair, but it is the way of the world here. The solar is the reward for power. You feel the warmth of the applewood fire soaking into your bones, making you feel heavy and content. You could stay here for a long time, watching the silver moonlight on the floor and listening to the quiet heart of the castle. But the night is moving on, and there are still places to see. Even in the solar, the light eventually fades. You stand up from the soft chair, feeling the cool air near the floor hit your ankles. You are heading back out to see how the castle stays lit during these long, dark hours. You want to see the torches and the oil lamps that guide the way through the stone labyrinth. You take one last breath of the honey-scented air and step toward the door, leaving the golden glow of the solar behind as you move back into the world of shadows and stone. You leave the quiet golden world of the solar and step back into the long dark corridor. Now that you're away from the steady glow of the applewood fire, you notice how much the castle relies on small sparks of light to fight the great winter dark. The sun is set so early in the winter that the night shift lasts for many, many hours. To see where they're going, the people of the castle use lighting technology. It is not like our lights today that we turn on with a switch. Every light in the castle is a tiny, living flame that needs to be fed and watched. You see a servant walking toward you carrying a long pole with a bunch of flaming grass at the end. This is a torch, but it is not just a piece of wood. It is made by taking a thick branch and wrapping it in tow, which are the rough, leftover bits of flax or hemp. Then, the tow is dipped into melted pitch or resin. Resin is the sticky sap that comes from pine trees. It smells very strong, like a deep forest, and it burns with a very bright, smoky orange flame. The servant uses the torch to light the iron sconces along the wall. These are metal rings that hold the torches in place. Here is a simple historical fact. Lighting a castle was very expensive. A single big torch could burn out in less than an hour, and it made a lot of black smoke that turned the ceilings dark. Because of this, most parts of the castle stayed very dark at night. People didn't try to light up every corner. They only lit the places where people were working or walking. Most of the castle was a world of deep shadows, where you had to find your way by touching the walls or remembering the number of steps. You look at a small light sitting on a stone ledge. This is a tallow candle. It is very different from the sweet beeswax candles in the solar. Tallow is made from animal fat, usually from cows or sheep. To make it, the fat is boiled down and strained until it is a white, greasy liquid. Then, a wick made of twisted thread is dipped into the fat over and over again until the candle is thick. When it burns, it does not smell like honey. It smells like cooking meat or a greasy kitchen. It also drips a lot of hot, stinking fat onto the floor. Now, take a long moment for silence. Stand very still and watch the flame of the tallow candle. It is not steady. It jumps and pulls as the drafts of cold air move through the hallway. The flame is a deep blue at the bottom and a hazy yellow at the top. You can hear the tiny sizz-pop of the animal fat as it melts. The light creates long, skinny shadows of your legs that stretch all the way to the ceiling. It feels like the darkness is a heavy blanket, and a little candle is trying its best to push it back. You notice a small, flat dish made of iron sitting near the candle. This is an oil lamp. It looks a bit like a small teapot without a lid. It is filled with oil made from crushed seeds or even fish. A piece of moss or a bit of rag sticks out of the spout and acts as a wick. This is a micro-history detail of the night shift. These lamps were cheap to run, but they were very dim. A guard might use one of these to read a message or check a lock. It gives off a small, steady circle of light that is just big enough to see your own hands. The people who look after the lights are very busy. There is a chandler in the castle whose whole job is making and managing the candles. During the winter, he works all day to make enough tallow candles for the night shift. He has to keep them in a cool, dry place so the mice don't eat them. Yes, because they are made of animal fat. The castle rats and mice think of candles as a very tasty snack. The chandler has to be careful to count every candle, because they are like money. You don't waste a candle if the moon is bright enough to see by. You see a servant using a snuffing iron. This is a pair of long metal tongs with a small cup at the end. When a candle wick gets too long, the flame starts to smoke and flicker. The servant uses the tongs to trim the burnt part of the wick. This makes the candle burn brighter and last longer. It is a constant job. You have to walk from room to room, trimming and checking, making sure no flame is left alone where it might start a fire. Fire is a friend for warmth, but it is a terrible enemy if it catches a tapestry or a pile of rushes. The light in the hallways is very warm in colour. Everything looks orange or red. This makes the cold stone look a bit friendlier than it does in the grey light of day. But it also makes it easy to hide in the shadows. You can stand just 5 feet away from someone in the corridor, and if you stay still, they might not see you at all. The night shift is a world of half-light. You learn to use your ears and your nose as much as your eyes. You smell the pine resin of a torch before you see the light around the corner. You look up at the ceiling. The smoke from the torches is hanging in a thin layer near the rafters. It makes the air feel a bit thick and scratchy in your throat. This is why the hallways have high ceilings and small vents in the stone. The smoke needs to go somewhere. In the winter, the smoke actually helps a little bit. It carries a tiny bit of heat from the flame, and the smell of the resin helps to cover the smell of the damp stone and the old rushes. It is part of the castle smell that everyone knows. There is a special kind of light used for very important jobs. It is a lanthorn. This is a candle set inside a box with sides made of thin, clear horn or even expensive glass. It has a handle on top so you can carry it in the wind without the flame going out. The word lanthorn is where we get our word lantern. You see a guard carrying one as he walks toward the gatehouse. The light swings back and forth, making the shadows on the wall jump and play. It looks like a little golden bird trapped in a cage. You realize that light is a way of marking time. A candle of a certain size will burn for exactly 1 hour. In some rooms, the candles have small notches carved into the side. As the wax melts down to a notch, the people know that another hour of the night has passed. The night shift is measured in wax and fat. When the last candle of the night is lit, everyone knows that the sun is finally starting to move toward the horizon. You feel the weight of the darkness again as you move away from the torches. You are heading toward the most quiet part of the castle. You want to see the chapel, where the monks and priests are waking up for their midnight prayers. You want to see how the light looks when it hits the gold and the stone of a holy place. You take a deep breath of the smoky air and follow the long, dim hallway toward the sound of a distant ringing bell. You follow the low, steady sound of a bell through a series of narrow, arched doors. The air here is different. It is even colder than the hallway, but it feels very clean. There is no smell of roasting meat or greasy tallow here. Instead, the air smells of beeswax, old parchment, and a very special scent called frankincense. This is a spicy, woody smell that comes from the dried sap of a tree in a far-off land. You have reached the castle chapel. It is the middle of the night, but for the monks and priests who live here, it is time to start their most important work. The chapel is a tall, thin room made of pale stone. High above, the ceiling is shaped like the hull of a wooden ship turned upside down. The windows are narrow, but they are filled with stained glass. In the moonlight, the red and blue glass looks dark, like deep water. There are no big fires here. The only warmth comes from a few clusters of thick beeswax candles sitting on a stone altar. The flames are tall and steady because the thick stone walls of the chapel keep the wind out perfectly. Here is a simple historical fact. The monks and priests in a castle followed a very strict schedule called the divine office. They divided the day and night into 8 parts. In the middle of the night, usually around 2 or 3 in the morning, They had to wake up for a service called matins. They believed that while the rest of the world was sleeping, someone had to stay awake to pray for the souls of everyone in the castle. They were the spiritual part of the night shift, guarding the castle with words instead of swords. You see a row of monks standing in wooden stalls along the walls. They are wearing long robes made of the thickest, coarsest wool you have ever seen. This is a micro-history detail of their life. Their robes are dyed a very dark brown or black, and they have large hoods that they pull up over their heads. They do not have gloves, so they tuck their hands deep into their opposite sleeves to keep their fingers from turning blue. You can see their breath rising in thin, straight lines toward the ceiling. They look like shadows that have learned how to sing. Now take a long moment for silence. The monks have not started singing yet. The chapel is so quiet that you can hear the tiny clink of a rosary string of wooden prayer beads hitting the side of a wooden bench. You can hear the soft rustle of their wool robes. The silence feels very heavy, as if the stones themselves are waiting for something. It is a holy kind of quiet. It makes you feel very calm. Even though the air is so cold, it makes your nose sting. Then the first monk begins to sing. It is not a song with many instruments or a fast beat. It is a plain chant. This is a single melody that many voices sing together. The sound is deep and smooth, like a river of honey moving through the cold air. The stone walls of the chapel are very good at echoing. The sound bounces off the floor and the ceiling, making it feel like the music is coming from everywhere at once. It is a beautiful, lonely sound that fills the empty space and makes the cold feel a little bit less scary. You notice a large book sitting on a wooden stand called lector. The book is very big, made of thick pages of vellum. Vellum is a special kind of paper made from the skin of a calf or a sheep. It is much stronger than the paper we use today. The letters are written in bright black and red ink, and the edges of the pages are decorated with real gold leaf. In the candlelight, the gold sparkles and shines. This book is the life map for the monks. It tells them exactly which prayers to say for every night of the winter. The monks have a special trick to stay awake in the cold. They use misericords. These are small wooden ledges carved onto the bottom of their folding seats. When the monks have to stand for a long time during the prayers, they can lean back against these tiny ledges. It helps to take the weight off their feet without them actually sitting down. It is a small bit of comfort in a life that is mostly about being tough and disciplined. You can see the carvings on the ledges. Some look like leaves, and some look like funny little monsters. As you watch them sing, you realize that these men are very tired. Their eyes are half closed, and their faces are pale in the yellow light. But they do not stop. They believe that their prayers are like a fire that keeps the castle safe from bad spirits. Just as the Fire Warden feeds the logs into the hearth, these men feed their voices into the dark. They are working to keep the inner life of the castle warm, while the winter tries to freeze the outside world. You see a small metal pot hanging from a chain. This is a censer. A young boy, a server, swings the pot back and forth. Inside are glowing coals and bits of frankincense. As it swings, a cloud of thick, sweet-smelling smoke fills the air. The smoke is warm, and for a second it feels good on your face. It makes the air look blurry and magical. The scent is very strong. It stays in your clothes and your hair, a reminder of the chapel that you will carry with you for the rest of the night. The service lasts for an hour. When it is finished, the monks do not talk. They bow their heads and walk out of the chapel in a long, silent line. They are heading back to their dormitory, a big room where they all sleep together on simple straw pallets. They will get a few more hours of sleep before the sun comes up, and they have to wake for the next set of prayers. Their night is a series of short naps and long, cold vigils. They are the quietest part of the night shift, but perhaps the most determined. You stay in the chapel for a moment after they have gone. The candles are burning low, and the smell of the incense is starting to fade. The music is gone, but the echo of it seems to stay in the stones. You feel a deep sense of peace. The chapel has shown you that warmth is not just about fire and wool, it is also about structure and hope. Even in the deepest, coldest part of the night, there is a rhythm and a purpose to everything that happens inside these walls. You turn toward the door, feeling the heavy wool of your own cloak. You are heading back toward the main part of the castle. You have seen the guards, the servants, the lord, and the monks. You have seen how everyone fights the winter in their own way. Now, you want to see the feeling of the night itself, the long, heavy darkness that covers the world like a shroud. You want to see how the people feel when the night seems like it will never end. You step back into the hallway. leaving the quiet chapel to the shadows and the stars. You walk away from the chapel and back into the narrow corridors of the tower. The air here is very still, almost as if it is frozen in place. You realize that you have been awake for a very long time. In our modern world, the night is short because we have light whenever we want it. But here, in the middle of a medieval winter, the darkness is a giant. It covers the world for 16 or 17 hours every day. This is the long darkness. It is not just the absence of light. It feels like a heavy velvet blanket that has been dropped over the whole castle. It presses against your eyes and makes the world feel very small. You stop by a small window slit and look out. The world outside is gone. There are no streetlights, no glow from distant cities, and no moving cars. There is only the black of the forest and the grey-white of the snow. The sky and the earth have melted together into one dark shadow. It feels like the castle is the only place left in the universe. This is the weight of the night shift. When you are awake in this darkness, your mind starts to play tricks. Every creak of the floorboards sounds like a footstep. Every moan of the wind sounds like a voice. You have to be strong in your heart to stay awake when the world is this dark and this quiet. Here is a simple historical fact about time in the Middle Ages. People did not use minutes and seconds like we do. Most people measured time by the sun, but in winter the sun is barely there. They divided the night into watches. Because there were no electric clocks, they used sand glasses or candles with marks on them to see how much of the night was left. When you are standing in a dark hallway, an hour can feel like a whole day. The night is a long, slow river that you have to swim across to reach the morning. You see a small object sitting on a stone shelf. It is a sand glass, which we might call an hourglass. It has two glass bulbs with a thin neck between them, filled with fine, dry sand. It is held in a frame made of dark wood. This is a very important tool for the night shift. A guard or a servant turns the glass over, and as the sand trickles down, it marks the passing of time. You watch the tiny grains of sand falling. It is a silent, steady movement. It reminds you that even if the night feels like it will never end, time is still moving. Every grain of sand that falls is one tiny bit of the darkness that is gone forever. Now, take a long moment for silence. Close your eyes and just listen to the darkness. You can hear your own heart beating in your ears. Thump, 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 thump. You can hear the blood rushing through your head. The castle is so quiet that the silence starts to have its own sound. It is a low, buzzing hum that fills the air. You realize that we are almost never in true silence in our modern lives. But here, the silence is as thick as the stone walls. It makes you feel very deep inside yourself. It is a time for thinking and for dreaming while you're still awake. The people of the castle have a different relationship with sleep because of this long darkness. In the winter, many people practice segmented sleep. This means they do not sleep for 8 hours straight like we do. Instead, they go to bed early when the sun goes down. They sleep for 4 or 5 hours, and then they wake up in the middle of the night, right about now. They might stay awake for an hour or two, sitting by the dying fire, talking softly, or praying. Then, they go back for their second sleep until the dawn. This middle time, this quiet watch, is a very special part of their lives. It is a time of peace before the hard work of the day begins again. You walk past a room where a small group of servants is sitting around a low brazier. They are not working. They are just sitting together in the dim light. One of them is telling a very old story about a brave knight and a dragon. Their voices are very low, almost a whisper. In the long darkness, you don't need to shout. The air carries the sound easily. You can see the orange light of the coals reflecting in their eyes. For them, this time together is what keeps the darkness from being scary. They share their stories and their warmth, making the night feel like a friend instead of an enemy. You notice a micro-history detail in the corner of the room. It is a small wooden board with holes and pegs. This is a game called Nine Men's Morris. It is a very simple game, but it is perfect for the long darkness. You don't need a lot of light to play it, and it keeps your mind busy, so you don't get bored or sad. People have played this game for hundreds of years, sitting in the shadows of castles just like this one. It is a way to kill time when time feels like it is standing still. The darkness also changes how people see the castle. By daylight, the castle is a place of business and war. But at night, it becomes a place of mystery. The shadows under the arches look like deep caves. The tapestries move in the drafts like they're trying to step off the walls. You start to understand why medieval people believed in ghosts and spirits. When you can only see a few feet in front of you, the world is full of secrets. But the people of the night shift are not afraid. They know every stone and every corner. To them, the darkness is just a different kind of weather that they have to live through every day. You think about the night watchman who walks the halls with a bell. His job is to make sure everything is safe, but also to let people know that the world is still there. He might call out 3 of the clock and all is well. His voice echoes through the stone tunnels, reaching the ears of the people in their beds and the servants on their pallets. It is a very reassuring sound. It breaks the long darkness and reminds everyone that they are part of a community. You are never truly alone, even in the middle of the blackest winter night. The long darkness is a test of patience. You cannot hurry the sun. You cannot make the morning come faster by being angry or moving quickly. You have to learn to wait. You have to learn to be still and let the night pass at its own pace. This is a skill that medieval people were very good at. They knew how to sit in the dark and wait for the light. It gave them a kind of quiet strength that we sometimes lose in our busy, bright world. You reach the end of the corridor and see a tiny change in the air. It is not light yet, but the darkness doesn't feel quite so heavy. It is like the night has let out a long sigh. You have made it through the deepest part of the long darkness. You have seen the silence and the shadows, and you have felt the weight of the hours. You feel a sense of pride. You have stood the watch, and you are still here. You turn toward a small door that leads back to the main tower. You are moving toward the end of your journey. You want to see the things that helped the people survive the physical cold of this long night. You want to see the wool and the fire one last time before the sun comes up. You take one last look at the black window, feeling the peace of the night in your heart, and move back into the hallway, ready for the final hours of the medieval night shift. You leave the dark corridor and enter a small room that smells like a farm. It is a dry, dusty, and very warm smell. This is the wool store. In the castle, wool is not just for clothes. It is the most important thing for staying alive. As you look around, you see big sacks of raw fleece, rolls of thick cloth, and baskets of finished hats and socks. You reach out and touch a roll of dark grey wool. It feels heavy and a little bit oily. This oil is called lanolin. It is a natural grease that sheep make to keep their skin dry in the rain. Even after the wool is cut from the sheep and made into cloth, some of that oil stays inside. This is a micro-history detail that saves lives. It means that even if you get wet from the snow, your wool clothes will still keep you warm. Here is a simple historical fact. England was famous for its wool in the Middle Ages. Almost everyone in the country had something to do with sheep. The wool was so important that the king's most important helper sat on a big sack of wool to show how much the country cared about it. For the people on the night shift, wool is like a second skin. It is the only material that can trap your body heat so well that you don't even feel the ice-cold air. Without wool, the castle would be empty in the winter because no one could survive the freezing stone. You pick up a pair of finished woolen hose. They are thick and feel a bit like felt. You can see how tightly the threads are woven together. In the medieval world, they would take the finished wool cloth and put it in a big tub of water. Then, men would stomp on it with their bare feet for hours. This was called fulling. It made the wool shrink and get very thick and tight. It turned the fabric into something that was almost like a soft piece of wood. It was so strong that wind could not blow through it, and a little bit of rain would just slide right off. Now, take a long moment for silence. The wool store is very quiet because the soft fabric soaks up all the sound. You can hear your own breathing, and it sounds very loud. You can hear the distant thump of the wind against the tower, but it feels very far away. The room feels like it is made of cotton wool. It is a very safe, soft feeling. You realize that the sheep are the silent heroes of the night. Their wool is what allows the guards to stand on the walls and the servants to sleep on the floor. You notice a small wooden tool sitting on a pile of fleece. It is a spindle. It is a thin stick of wood with a round weight on the bottom. To make wool into thread, women would spin this stick between their fingers. It is a very slow job that takes a lot of patience. To make enough wool for one cloak, a woman might have to spin for hundreds of hours. Every piece of clothing you have seen tonight started with a woman sitting by a fire, spinning thread while the winter wind blew outside. It is a reminder that warmth is something that is built, one thread at a time. You look at a finished cloak hanging on a peg. It is dyed a deep blue color. To get this color, they used a plant called woad. They would crush the leaves and ferment them in big vats. It smelled terrible, like rotting vegetables, but it made a beautiful blue that never faded. Most of the people on the night shift wear brown or grey wool because it is cheaper, but the officers and the Lord wear these bright colours. Even in the dark, the colour of your wool tells everyone who you are. But whether it is blue or brown, the wool works the same way. It holds the heat of your heart close to your ribs. In the corner of the room, there is a basket of carding combs. These are wooden boards with hundreds of tiny metal teeth. Before the wool can be spun, these combs are used to brush the fleece until all the hairs are straight and clean. It is like brushing a giant, messy head of hair. The night shift workers in the weaving rooms often do this work late into the evening. The sound of the combs, shritch, scritch, scritch, is one of the most common sounds in a medieval house. It is the sound of people preparing for the cold. You think about the sheep out in the fields. They are hardy animals with thick coats that allow them to sleep in the snow without getting cold. By wearing their wool, we are borrowing their strength. We are taking the protection that nature gave to the animals and using it to survive in a stone castle. It is a very close connection between humans and nature. You can still smell the faint grassy scent of the meadows and the rolls of cloth. It is a summer smell hidden inside a winter tool. You notice that the wool cloth feels bouncy. When you press it with your finger, it springs back. This is because wool is very elastic. This is taxed. It helps the clothes fit tightly to your body. If your clothes are loose, the cold air can get inside and steal your heat. But tight wool hose and tunics act like a seal. They keep the warm air trapped against your skin. This is why medieval clothes look so tight in old pictures. It wasn't just fashion. It was a way to stay alive. The wool store is the quietest, warmest feeling room you have found yet. Even without a fire, it feels cozy because there is so much fabric. You realize that comfort in the medieval world is a very simple thing. It is not about buttons or dials. It is about having enough wool between you and the stone. You feel a new sense of respect for the simple sheep and the people who work with their fleece. They are the ones who make the castle a home instead of a prison. You turn back toward the door. You have seen the fuel, the fire, the food, and the fabric. You have seen all the things that the night shift uses to fight the winter. You feel like you understand the castle now. It is a giant machine made of stone, but it is kept running by the warmth of human bodies and the things they create. The night is almost over now. You can feel a change in the air. The darkness is not quite as heavy as it was before. You move back into the hallway, heading toward the main tower one last time. You want to see the first signs of the morning. You want to see the world wake up from its long frozen sleep. You feel the weight of your woolen cloak on your shoulders, and you are glad for it. The wool has been your friend all through this night, and it will be your friend until the sun comes up. You walk toward the stairs, listening for the first sounds of the dawn. You climb back up the spiral stairs, but this time your legs feel a bit lighter. The air in the stone tunnel is still freezing, but it does not feel as lonely as it did in the middle of the night. You reach a small landing and stop to listen. The silence of the long darkness is finally starting to break. From deep below in the kitchens, you hear a loud clatter-bang of an iron pot. Then you hear the distant muffled sound of a rooster crowing in the village outside the walls. It is a thin, brave sound that cuts through the frosty air. The morning thaw is beginning, not in the temperature, but in the life of the castle. The night shift is now handing over its work to the day. You see the Fire Warden from the Great Hall walking slowly up the stairs. He is finished with his long watch. His face is grey with tiredness and ash, but he looks satisfied. Behind him, the hall fire is roaring again, fed with fresh logs to greet the morning. This is a very busy time. The people who have been sleeping on the floors are rolling up their straw pallets and tucking their cloaks away. The transition from night to day is like a slow engine starting to turn. Here is a simple historical fact. Medieval people did not have a weekend or a day off in the way we do. Every morning, as soon as there was enough light to see, the work began. The only thing that changed the schedule was the church bell or the change of the seasons. In the winter, the workday was short because the light was so rare. This meant that the moment the dawn appeared, everyone had to move very fast to make the most of the few hours of warm sun they were about to get. You look at a small window slit. The blackness of the night has turned into a deep, bruised purple. Then it changes again to a cold, misty grey. You can see the shapes of the trees in the valley now. They are covered in a thick layer of white hoarfrost, making them look like ghosts. Hoarfrost is a special kind of ice that forms when the damp air freezes onto the branches in beautiful spiky patterns. It is very pretty, but it is a sign of just how cold the night has been. The world outside looks like it is made of silver and glass. Now, take a long moment for silence. Stand by the window and watch the grey light grow stronger. You can hear the coal groaning as it starts to warm up. The wooden beams are popping and the stones are making tiny clicking sounds. It is the sound of the building stretching its limbs after a long frozen sleep. You can hear the first few voices in the courtyard, servants calling to each other, the rattle of a bucket, the neigh of a horse. It is a very hopeful sound. The night was long, but it did not last forever. You walk down to the kitchen area. The smell of fresh bread is now so strong it feels like a physical thing. The boys are pulling the brown loaves out of the big stone oven with their wooden peels. The bread is steaming, and the crusts are crackling as they hit the cool air. This is the first breaking fast of the day. The workers are lining up with wooden bowls to get a chunk of hot bread and a mug of warm ale. This food gives them the energy to start the hard work of clearing the snow and tending the animals. You notice a servant carrying a large basin of steaming water toward the stairs. This is for the Lord's morning wash. To get that water hot, the kitchen staff had to keep a giant cauldron boiling over the fire for an hour. It is a great luxury. Most people will just splash their faces with the icy water from the well. You see a kitchen maid doing exactly that near the door. She flinches as the cold water hits her skin, but then she rubs her face hard with a rough linen cloth. Her cheeks turn bright red. It is a shock to the system that tells the body the night is over. The castle feels tighter now. During the night, the shadows made everything feel big and empty. But in the grey morning light, you see the walls and the furniture clearly. You see the dust on the floor and the soot on the ceiling. You see the reality of the fortress. It is a place of hard stone and hard work, but it is also a place that has kept everyone safe. You look at the people moving past you. They look tired, but they are moving with purpose. They have survived another winter night, and that is a victory. You see the icebreaker from earlier. He is finally putting down his iron bar. The well is open, and a long line of servants is waiting to fill their buckets. The courtyard is full of movement. Someone is throwing grain to the chickens, who are pecking at the frozen ground. The stable boys are leading the horses out to the water trough. The animals are steaming in the cold air, their breath coming out in big white clouds. It looks like the whole courtyard is on fire with the breath of living things. A bell begins to ring from the chapel. This is the prime bell, marking the first hour of the day. The monks are back in their stools, singing the morning prayers. Their voices are a bit stronger now, buoyed by the arrival of the light. The sound of the bell rolls across the castle, over the battlements, and out into the snowy valley. It is a signal to the whole world that the watch is ended. The night shift is over, and the day has begun. You feel a deep sense of relief. The long darkness was heavy, and the cold was sharp, but the morning has arrived. You think about the night shift workers you have seen. The Fire Warden, the guards, the cooks, the monks, and the icebreakers. They have carried the castle through the dark. They have kept the fires burning and the water flowing and the prayers rising. They are the ones who made sure that the people in the beds woke up to a safe, warm house. You walk toward the main gate. The heavy iron bars are being slid back with a loud clack-clack. The big wooden doors are being pushed open. A blast of fresh, cold air enters the castle, but it feels different from the night air. It feels new. It feels like a start of something. You stand in the doorway and look out at the white world. The grey light is getting brighter every second. You have seen the secrets of the night, and now you are ready to see the sun. You take a deep breath of the morning air, feeling the weight of the night lift from your shoulders. You stand in the great doorway of the castle, and finally, it happens. Over the jagged line of the frozen forest, a sliver of bright golden light breaks the grey. It is the sun. At first it is just a tiny spark, like a diamond sitting on the edge of the world. But as it rises, the light spreads across the snow, turning everything from a dull blue to a brilliant sparkling white. The shadows of the towers stretch out long and thin across the courtyard, but they are no longer scary. They are just shapes on the ground. The night has been defeated. The sun has returned to claim the fortress. As the light hits the stone walls, the castle seems to change colour. The cold grey rocks turn a warm, soft yellow. You see the frost on the battlements start to glisten like millions of tiny stars. A few drops of water begin to fall from the long icicles hanging from the roof. Plink, plink, plink. It is the sound of the world starting to thaw. Even though the air is still very cold, the sight of the sun makes your heart feel light. You watch the golden light move across the snow. and you realize that every living thing in the castle is looking toward the east, feeling the same hope. Here is a simple historical fact about the winter sun in medieval times. Because there were no clocks, the sun was the only way people knew exactly where they were in the day. In the middle of winter, the sun stays very low in the sky, even at noon. It never gets very high or very hot. This meant that the light was a precious thing that you had to use while it lasted. The moment the sun rose, the day shift took over completely, and the night shift workers could finally find a warm corner to sleep. You look at the guards on the wall. The sun hits their steel helmets, making them flash like mirrors. They stand a little taller now, their faces warmed by the first rays of the morning. You see the smoke from the castle chimneys rising straight up into the cleared blue sky. It is a thick, white smoke that shows the fires are healthy and strong. The smell of the morning is crisp and clean, like a fresh apple. It is a world away from the smoky, heavy air of the midnight halls. You take a long, deep breath and feel the sun on your cheeks. Now, take a final moment for silence. The castle is busy, but you stay perfectly still in the doorway. Listen to the morning. You can hear the song of a small bird, a robin, sitting on a stone ledge. You can hear the happy voices of the children who are finally allowed to run out into the courtyard to play in the snow. You can hear the heavy thud of the gate being locked in its open position. The world is wide and bright and full of life. The fear of the long darkness has vanished in the light of the new day. You see a micro-history detail near the gate. It is a small wooden sundial carved into the stone wall. As the sun rises higher, the shadow of a metal pin moves across the carved lines. This is how the castle marks the hours of the day. You watch the shadow move just a tiny bit. It is the beginning of a new story. The night shift has done its job. The walls are safe, the fires are lit, and the people are fed. You have seen the hard work and the clever tricks that kept this world alive through the frost. As you stand there, you feel a deep sense of peace. You have walked through the stone corridors and seen the secrets of the medieval night. You have felt the cold and found the warmth. You have seen how people and animals and even the building itself work together to survive. It is a story of toughness and hope. No matter how long the night is, the sun always comes back. No matter how deep the frost, the fire can always be lit. You feel part of a very old rhythm, a cycle of dark and light that has been turning for 1,000 years. The sun is higher now, and the golden light is filling the whole courtyard. The day shift is in full swing. You see the blacksmith starting his fire and the stables humming with activity. The castle is no longer a silent mystery. It is a busy town made of stone. You have seen the guardian of the past do his work, and now you can rest. You take one last look at the sparkling snow and the yellow stone walls, feeling the warmth of the sun and the memory of the fire in your heart. The world is growing very quiet and very soft now. The stone walls of the castle are fading away into a gentle mist, and you are returning to the safety of your own space. You can feel the heaviness in your limbs and the warmth of your own blankets wrapping around you like a cocoon. The stories of the night shift have done their work, and your mind is ready to surrender to the peace of a deep, restful sleep. You are safe, you are warm, and you are far away from the biting wind and the frozen stone. Think of the long darkness as a friend that brings you rest. Imagine the steady rhythm of the castle's heart beating in the silence, a slow and calming thrum that leads you down into dreams. The shadows are soft and kind, like the velvet curtains of a great bed. There is nothing left to do and nowhere left to go. The fire has been banked, the watch has been stood, and the world is waiting for you to simply be. Let the light of the morning fade into a soft golden memory as you drift further away from the waking world. The sun is rising. The gates are opening. The watch is ended.